running low and slow. That's the Florida way. Moonshine on the swamp, night and day. Uncle Moonshine with his secret brew under the cypress where the fire burns blue.
Hey, I like that. David Beatty put that song together for me. That's totally AI. I like it.
It's a cool intro. It's a cool intro.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here, Alan. I really do. Doing this podcast. I know you got a lot going on. You're a busy guy. And I really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your story with us. If you would not mind, just start off, introduce yourself, let us know where you're at, where you live, kind of thing, you know. So everybody that doesn't know you gets a better idea who you are and what's going on.
Absolutely. And I should apologize up front. I probably sound a little weird. I've had a cold. I'm getting over all that stuff. So, anyways, my name's Alan Bishop. I am the head alchemist at Old Homestead Distillery. I have been a legal distiller now for 11 years. Started off on the legal side at Copper and Kings, and then at Spirits of French Lick. I've worked on a lot of other projects over the years. I do a lot of historic distilling. I worked with Locust Grove. I'm now working with Indiana Spring Mill State Park to reinstate the old Daisy Spring Mill Distillery. I do a lot of distilling out at George Washington's Mount Vernon, but I come from a family of distillers here in southern Indiana. Grew up in distilling. My family is all from eastern and central Kentucky. They came up here in the 40s to get jobs. And my dad's family, they bought a little farm that they converted into a tobacco farm. And so we grew tobacco and made moonshine to basically pay property taxes and pay for Christmas. And so I grew up around that. I remember being around stills when I was probably 2-3 years old, and there wasn't anything romantic or cool about it. It was just another reason we couldn't go do fun things on the weekend as far as I was concerned. So, you know, it's just another piece of work and everything that we had to do. But you know, as a kid, you don't really appreciate that stuff, but you know, I had the fortune of having the parents that, you know, everybody would call the cool parents, I guess, that they knew I was going to find stuff to do one way or the other. They'd rather me do it at home than somewhere else. So when I was 15, I got sort of tangentially interested in distillation for obvious reasons. And my dad and my grandfather helped me build a little still out of a 10-gallon coffee dispenser, stainless steel coffee dispenser from down at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And they gave me 2 rules. And the rules were, don't blow your ass up in the backyard and bring us something when it's worth drinking. And they refused to teach me how to do anything. Of course, I knew all the things that I'd seen them do, and I mimicked that for a long time, mostly sugar shines. We did a lot of brandies growing up, sugar-based brandies, more or less because everybody had an apple tree or a pear tree in their yard, and they didn't use them for anything. They didn't want all the bees and everything around. So I've been stung by every creature in the state of Indiana, I'm pretty sure, multiple times. And so when I was, I don't know, in my early 20s, after getting involved in music on a semi-professional level for a little while, I decided to convert the old tobacco farm into a ecological produce farm. And what I was really interested in was sustainable agriculture and then breeding new varieties of various different things into open pollinated varieties to save seeds from, to fit the wider Ohio Valley. Well, you find out very quickly at that time, in the middle of nowhere, you can't make any money off produce because everybody and their brother's got a garden. And even if you beat them to market with, beat 90% of them to market with tomatoes, maybe you have a week or two that does good. And then the week after that, the neighbor guy pulls up with a trunk full of tomatoes and starts giving them away. So you quickly realize I have an abundance and an excess of all types of great produce and nothing to do with it because I can't sell it. And, you know, I'm mostly focused on seeds, but seeds don't continuously pay the bills. And I can't really get, you know, bulk sales of these seeds. So what do? You start converting it into alcohol, and you figure out real quickly that you can sell alcohol at the farmer's market. So there was an episode of Hee Haw one time. I don't know if you ever saw this or not, but where they were reading a guy's obituary, and in his obituary, it said that he was a market gardener and independent amateur distiller. And that was kind of what I was doing at that time. And then by the time I was probably in my late 20s, I had a 150-gallon still set up in my parents' backyard. It was out in the open, man. I mean, it was right out in the open. As a matter of fact, there's a funny story. They used to, the helicopters used to come over looking for marijuana there in the fall of the year. And I was outside running one time and I saw them come over and they were low. I mean, I could see the faces in the helicopter going over. Oh, well, I guess this is it. I saw them, they flew over and the guy from the National Guard's hanging out of the helicopter and he just waved. My then fiance, now wife Kim, was like, "Hey, you got to go find a job doing this somewhere because you're going to get yourself in trouble doing what you're doing." And we were getting to a point at that point where a lot of people who shouldn't have known that I was doing what I was doing somehow knew what I was doing, and that was about the time that the show Moonshiner started and all that stuff. And so we'd go somewhere to a party or something and a jar would come around and there'd be people that knew that it came from me that should have never known that it came from me.
Oh, shit.
So it was starting to get a little scary. But unfortunately, on my end, my state, and we can talk a little bit about the history and the background of the Black Forest of Southern Indiana here in a little while too.
Yeah.
We didn't have an artisan permit until 2013, 2014. So our state we still had a lot of blue laws from Prohibition. And one of the things that they really fought against at first was allowing for craft distilleries. So I went to several of the summer study committees. We had a particular state senator who kept referring to the potential craft distilling bill as the distill on every hill bill. Do with it. So I had to go to Kentucky to go find a job, which I'm only about 30 minutes north of Louisville, Kentucky anyways. So I wrote the world's worst resume and took a jar of liquor and put in applications everywhere that I could. And I finally got on at Copper and Kings and
cool.
My foot in the door and did the American brandy thing for a couple of years, and did not take me long to realize that I did not want to be in Louisville, Kentucky, nor did I want to be at Copper and Kings. I did not enjoy the culture of the work at Copper and Kings. I love brandy. I didn't necessarily enjoy the people. I didn't enjoy the people I worked for. I enjoyed a lot of people I worked with, but not the people I worked for. But
that's usually the case, right?
yeah. So I saw my opportunity to get into Indiana over in Orange County, the county next door to where I live, at Spirits of French Lick, and got in there and laid out their program. And we really turned that into a world-class distillery. We won a lot of big accolades from a lot of big writers and a lot of big reviewers. In fact, I don't brag on myself very often, but I will say I think that Spirits of French Lick and Iron Root Republic down in Texas, and there's a few others here and there. I think we were some of the earlier, I won't say the earliest, but the earlier craft distillers to really get some national and international recognition. So
super. Wow, that's awesome, man.
Mm-hmm. And then I left there last April, and I've been over at Old Homestead Distilling at Patoka Lake, which we can talk about a little bit tonight too. Since then, and I actually have a little ownership in that company. I love the people I work for and the people that I work with, and getting to I've kind of taken the brakes off, and I can do a little bit of anything that I want to over there. So
that's nice. That makes a world of difference too. If you like who you're working for and with, it makes going to work fun.
It does, and people who care about their company too, right? I mean,
right.
I've seen, I will say this, I've seen both sides of the coin. I've seen the coin where they have all the money in the world and all the marketing in the world, and they could care less about quality, which was very much so that first company.
Yeah.
And I've seen the company where they're happy to have the quality, but they don't have the money for the marketing. And then also went through generational shift at Spirits of French Lick too, that caused some stuff. But I don't want to be on either side of those two things. Neither of those is a good place to be. So,
no. And, that being said, I mean, I've looked into it myself as far as opening a distillery and going through all the red tape and everything. There's a lot involved. More, and I got into it so much that I got to the point where I was like, no, I don't think I want to do this.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, this is the last one, man. If this don't stick, I will listen. I don't have a whole lot of high paying skills. I'll go dig ditches and do this on the side for fun again. That's fine. I'm not, this is my last startup distillery. It ain't happening again.
So
I'm done.
It is a startup distillery.
It is. Yep. So the Patoka Lake, so that complex there. So let me give you a little background on that real quick, just so
Sure,
you so
I'm
you,
gonna show a picture of the what you
yeah.
got. I stole this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that the compound, as we call it over there, we actually have a trademark called Alcohol Acres. We actually
Oh, cool.
trademarked that, which is awesome. But
Yeah.
so Patoka Lake is the second largest reservoir in the state of Indiana, and there's a lot of history tied there too to moonshining as well. It's one of those situations, kind of like Land Between the Lakes, where the government came in and kind of took everybody's land, and they did it in some ways for the right reasons. The reason that reservoir is there wasn't really a monetary thing. It was because the towns that were sort of downstream from that area would flood horribly when it would rain. It was all floodplain down from there, and so it saved a lot of those towns. But in the process, it put three towns underwater: a town called Newton Stewart, a town called Elon. And there's a third one in there. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but they put this in the late 70s. Of course, they came in, bought the land from the people for nothing, force sold it basically. So the people, a lot of Welsh ancestry there, a lot of Scots Irish ancestry, which is a little different than the rest of the Black Forest of Indiana, which is mostly German. So there's already a lot of moonshining happening in the area. But when they did this sell off, a lot of the local residents first they took to selling the timber because it was all old growth timber, some of the oldest in Indiana. It's that whole area is surrounded by the Hoosier National Forestry. And then after that, after the government started taking land, people would go set up moonshine stills on the government land, run off as much moonshine as they could, get off the property. So when they came in, they took out the town of Newton Stewart. There were 3 different moonshine stills that were found that were active there at the town of Newton Stewart.
Wow.
So back in I guess it was, I think maybe the 80s, if I'm remembering my history right. I hope I don't get this wrong. So there was a DNR marina down there, and the DNR wasn't doing a great job of taking care of that marina. So they contracted it out. And the group that I work with, they got involved in that marina contract. From there, they'd been involved in several things, including cell phone towers. They were buying, high hill property all around the country, different places, and putting in pager towers at the time, selling those off. So they got this piece of property. It was the last kind of piece of property before you get to the gate of the lake. And they put in a gas station. Later on, they put in the winery. They've got floating cabins. They've got land cabins. They've got, all kinds of cool boats and stuff like that you can rent. They've got silos that they've turned into like suites, basically like hotel suites. And then they just put in the distillery. We just got the distillery operational this past year with the hotel, which is a 28-room hotel. There's a brewery there on site as well. We don't own the brewery, but we are good friends with the owners of the brewery. We do own the property there where the brewery is, etc. So it's a very rural county. There's only about 9,000 people live in that county, but that lake is actually the largest tourist attraction in southern Indiana in the summertime. So that main gate between the months of June and August or so gets anywhere between 1.5 to 3 million visitors a year.
I think I do have a small picture of that here. No, that's too, yeah. But that goes on to, it tells us a little story on there about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about the hotel and the common room and bistro.
Yep. It's a neat place. It's a really neat place. It's funny. I always joke there's no such thing as southern Indiana. It's Hoosier occupied northern Kentucky, right? And if you abbreviate that, it spells the word honky, which is perfect for us because there's 2 different cultures in Indiana. There's everything from the river going up to about Columbus, Indiana, Seymour, Indiana, and then north of that, as far as I'm concerned, is Canada. But just 2 very, very different cultures. But I joke that, Hoosiers are what they are. We're hillbillies, and a lot of us, our families came from Appalachia. We're Appalachian in many ways. We're just removed by a couple generations because our people came here to look for jobs, etc. in the 40s. But there is a distinct difference between a Hoosier and what I would call a lake Hoosier. So the people that come to the lake, that's a whole different breed of people, right? I don't even entirely, like, I'm pretty redneck, and I'm a little scared of them sometimes. So yeah, it's a little different crowd.
Well, I talked to Mike Friend earlier, And he told me, I hope he tells the story about where he's from. You just did.
Right. The Hoosier Occupied Northern Kentucky thing. Yeah. That was actually, I give credit where credit's due. I didn't come up with that, although I've kind of trademarked it. Al Young from Four Roses came up with that. A lot of people don't know this, but Al Young was actually, he was a Hoosier. He was from Scottsburg, Indiana. See, us Hoosiers that are next to the river, we don't get anywhere near enough credit, because we're in Bourbon's backyard and everybody thinks that river's magic, right? That nothing good could ever come from the north side of the river. But I'll tell you what, if you go through and you really look at your bourbon history in Kentucky, you'll see that there are two states that contributed as much to Kentucky as Kentucky ever contributed to itself, and that's Indiana and Pennsylvania. If it wasn't for Indiana and Pennsylvania, they wouldn't know how to run a still in Kentucky.
All those guys in Kentucky right now are going, hey, man.
Oh, they like it when I start my trash because they don't, they know they can't argue with it because my family's all from Kentucky, and they also know that I know the history of that whole thing. So there's, it is what good things have come out of Kentucky. Don't get me wrong. I just, the best thing that came out of Kentucky is all the smart Kentuckians learned how to swim and got across the river into Indiana.
So. I knew you were going to say that. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, you mentioned your wife earlier. I got a picture of you and her right here. Share it.
Yeah. Yep.
You talk about one piece at a time. You want to share a little bit with that with us? One piece at a time?
Absolutely. So much like the Johnny Cash song, I learned all my skills one piece at a time. I didn't have any real formal training, as it were. I knew about how to make sugar shines and all that sort of stuff, but I've learned all the more complicated things one piece at a time as I went and got one piece of equipment at a time and had to scrap things together one piece at a time. And so a huge part of what I do is in education, whether that be training other actual distillers, going places to help out like Mount Vernon or Locust Grove or Spring Mill, things of that nature, setting up at Beck's Mill and telling people about the local history of distilling here in Southern Indiana and the Black Forest region. And so one piece at a time is my YouTube channel, which is basically an outreach channel for distillers of all stripes. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer those to the best of my ability, to the best of my knowledge, to try to help advance distillers in any way that I can, in any way, shape, or form, what I can. It's not necessarily a channel for beginners because there's a lot of those already out there. Right. It's not a high production value channel. Most of the videos are just going to be me talking and answering questions. And, I can do that with some confidence because I've tried a lot of things over the years and worked with a lot of things, and the things that I don't know, I know professionals that I can ask and they can kind of answer those questions. But that's what it's there for, is for people who do have those questions. Maybe you're having a problem with fermentation or a problem with distillation, or maybe you need an alternative view of how to do something, right? I like to be the guy that is able to answer those questions for people and help them out, and do that sort of thing all the way down to writing books or whatever I do. And there will be an educational component to Old Homestead Distillery as well. That's part of the beauty of having a hotel is, I can get you drunk and you don't got to go home. You can just go get in bed right down the hallway. But we'll be able to set up classes where we'll do full on, maybe we'll do distilling 101 classes. It'll be 3 or 4 days, something like that. Get a few of those classes go through there. And then we can narrow that down, and maybe some people from those distilling 101 classes, maybe they want to do a class that's based on rye whiskey or apple brandy. We can do that. And then, absinthe or rum, or we bring in other distillers or that sort of thing. Yep. Absinthe and apple brandy are my two things. So
you said that, I've been doing this now about 14 years. I don't even come close to call myself a professional whatsoever. And I learn stuff new every day. And I personally feel like I want to go take a class and start at the beginner class and go that way and go forward instead of starting knowing that I know and have experience at it. I don't want to start in the middle and go there. I want to start at the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, I learned a lot
of stuff that I don't know in the beginning.
Yeah. I still learn new stuff every day. Here's an honest to God thing. This is no joke. So I am one of those people that's autodidactic and really, I'm really good at teaching myself. I'm really good at learning from myself and having to do things the hard way, but I'm also really good at not seeing the forest for the trees. So if somebody wanted to know how to make some very strange alchemical based thing from the 1400s or 1500s with 80 recipes in it that was distilled, or 80 different ingredients in it that was distilled, I could probably give you a pretty good idea of how to do that. But if you ask me to flavor a jar of liquor after distillation,
That's me.
up until recently, dumbest person on the face of the planet, because that was never something that I did a lot of. And now, now I have the levity to do that over at Old Homestead, and I need to do that. It's a lake crowd. They like sweet things. We sell sweet wine over there. They like sweet things. So I've had to take myself to school on post distillation flavoring, and thankfully I have somebody to bounce that off of with my new still hand, Tyler Richardson, who also grew up as a home distiller here in Southern Indiana, and he's excellent at doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, how's that for a professional? I always say there's no such thing as a master. If anything, I'm a masturbator, and that's about it. And
Yeah,
that's why.
And I'm not even good at that.
Right. I don't know. I got a lot of hours of practice. That might make me a pro, but that's why I always say I call myself an alchemist and not a master distiller, because there's no such thing as a master distiller. It doesn't exist.
Well,
the only way you can be titled a master distiller if your peers call you a master distiller. But I always say that I'm an alchemist, and the reason for that is because if you're going to just be a pretentious ass, go all the way for it, right? Don't stop at master distiller. Go for alchemist or wizard or magi or some shit like that, and really do it.
You brought that up because, and I feel like an idiot, but I don't. I've never heard it called alchemist before. Okay, And when I looked it up, I found a couple of different meanings, and by the way you're talking, you just nailed it for me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's
one way it was described as it was a chemist, and I was like, well, why don't we just call him a chemist?
Yeah, well, and the truth of the matter is, all of your chemistry comes from alchemy. Now, the thing about alchemy is it's a double-edged path, and it's the root of all distillation comes from alchemy. Specifically, all chemistry and all distillation come from a set of words called the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus. That is the start of pretty much all modern chemistry, all alchemy. But alchemy just is a spiritual slant on chemistry in many ways. And so you're taking various things through transformative processes. What the alchemists were really interested in on a physical realm was replicating natural processes and why does the world work the way that it does. But they were doing the same thing on a spiritual level as well. So you're just taking the spiritual and the scientific and you're putting them together. And that's what alchemy is. And for me, that's what distillation is. I always tell people that wherever the crossroads of distillation and history and philosophy and spirituality, wherever those meet at, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm interested in. And that also includes education, obviously, having written a couple books about distilling now, and doing a distiller's almanac. I mean, that's as alchemical as it gets, right? You have a farmer's almanac. Every trade had an almanac, but ironically, when I did the research, nobody had ever done a distiller's almanac. And I went through literally hundreds of volumes of different American almanacs. And I never could find any information on distillation in any of the old American almanacs. It's never been done before. So that's something I'm real proud of, and something I consider a very important part of what I do for sure.
Awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. These are all topics you're already hitting on everything I was going to talk about. So this is flowing really good, buddy. And I get that because you've been on other podcasts yourself, on different ones besides this one, right?
Yeah. So I do. I'm on a bunch of them. I'm on a bunch of them. Yeah, I do. We also have the other one I should always promote, and I always forget. Two of them, but Distillers Talk, which I've done with Christy Atkinson now since I think 2019. It's literally, we bring in distillers of all shades and stripes from all over the world. Doesn't matter whether they're home distillers, professional distillers, historic distillers, whatever. And we bring them in and we ask them questions, and we have a good time. And sometimes I'll throw a rant in there just for fun. And Christy Atkinson has put up with a lot of shit out of my mouth over the years, and it's done well for us. Can't complain. And then on the other hand, I have If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything, which is my paranormal, high strangeness, Fortean leanings. It really started off, honestly, what that started off as is, I'm a believer in all kinds of things. Yeah, I just did the paranormal NL with Jen. That's a fun show there. So I don't think
I definitely have to go check that out.
Yeah,
I can't say that I have, but I definitely will.
Yeah. I've done several of those. I've been on several of the big paranormal podcasts, several of the big distilling podcasts, all that stuff. But for me, it's all part and parcel of the same thing. I can't draw a line between my distilling and my spirituality, they're very intermingled in everything that I do, without a doubt. So I know I joke all the time. You know, everybody, if you don't make some, if your very existence doesn't make someone mad, you're not doing something right. So I always joke with people, like, the people who don't like me, I think they have a hard time like figuring out what they want to call me. So it's either that I'm a redneck, which automatically makes me a racist or whatever in their head, right? Or am I a hipster? Because I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed to be a redneck and a hipster at the same time,
Can't be both.
right? So I'm not sure how that plays out for people.
That's funny. Hey, Wayne from Ozark Steelworks just popped in and said, "Hey guys."
What's up, Wayne? That's
A lot of people are saying hello. Hello, everybody. Thanks for popping in. Again, this is Alan Bishop as a guest, and he's telling us his life story.
right.
Which I appreciate. It's very interesting. And the more I get to know you, the more I like you, sir. I admire you, to tell you the truth.
Thank you.
I don't know how you keep up with yourself.
Sometimes I wonder, for sure. I don't know. I go down rabbit holes a lot. That's for sure. So,
got a couple of photos I'll share here with you. Here's one of you. I like this one.
Yep. That's that there at Mount Vernon. That was
I got a lot of pictures of Mount Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
That was just recent, right?
Yeah, that was just back in November. That's I try to go to Mount Vernon twice a year, March and November. And Steve Bayshore has been very gracious in having me out there to help out, and I've done that, I think, 5 times now total. I plan to continue to do it, but obviously I've helped out with the rye whiskey production over the past couple of years, and we also did some apple brandy back in the spring. That was kind of always my dream, was to do an apple brandy with my buddies out at Mount Vernon, and so we got to do that. And then this last trip was really special. So Steve has developed a fantastic team at Mount Vernon. This is a story that doesn't get told often, in my opinion. So everybody thinks of Mount Vernon, they think of the George Washington thing, and they should, right? Mount Vernon is probably the most important, no doubt, not just probably, is the most important historic distillery in United States history, as far as I'm concerned. If you were a distiller, you should want to go to Mount Vernon. I think it's a great privilege to get to go to Mount Vernon. But I do think the general public, when they look at that distillery, have sort of looked at it as it's kind of a historic, gimmicky sort of thing. And I think that maybe for a very long time that might have been the case. But Steve Bayshore has developed a fantastic world-class distilling team at Mount Vernon from people who didn't have experience distilling before. And they are literally making world-class whiskeys at this point. They're making whiskeys that I would put on par with anything coming out of any of the decent-sized craft or smaller-sized big distilleries, anything you'd consider craft whatsoever. Whiskeys that can win awards very, very easily and have won awards very, very easily. So they're very worthwhile with their spirits production. And it is being done the old way, double pot still distillation with an open fire, all that stuff. Mark Meltonville, a food historian from England, he's sort of the walking boss of the floor there, and helps keep an eye on all the fires and keep everybody in line, because you can bring distillers in, guest distillers, to help teach the team things or help them advance their skills, but doesn't mean they know anything about keeping a fire going or how to run a fire underneath a still, because they're used to whatever they do at work. So it's turned into this amazing thing. And I got the awesome opportunity. I was asked, I guess not this past November, the November before, Steve had said something to me about wanting to do a 4-grain American whiskey. And so we don't have a historic mash bill for that because it's not something that had existed. But what we do have is the purview of, is this something that was happening in George Washington's time at other distilleries on the East Coast? And so he asked me to design that mash bill. And so I came up with, I have to complicate everything. So it's a 4-grain, it's a 4-grain whiskey. It's technically a 6-grain whiskey. So it's a rye, a corn, and a oat mash bill primarily. And then the 4th grain is actually technically 3 grains. The 4th grain is malt, but it's all those previous 3 grains malted. Okay. And the reason we did that is because at various different times, especially in the 1700s, wheat was illegal to distill because it was a food product. barley malt was hard to get a hold of unless you're next door to a brewer. Now, George Washington wouldn't have had a problem because he was there in Alexandria and he had some connections, obviously, but a lot of other East Coast distillers wouldn't have. So this went to what did a farmer have on hand at that time that were cheap grains? They certainly had corn, they certainly had rye, and they certainly had oats. And so that made for a really interesting experience. And the only thing I did was develop the mash bill. The team at Mount Vernon, it was their protocols, their fermentations, their yeast. Amy coached. It was her fermentation side of the room. She handled all that stuff. And of course, got to hang out with, my brothers, Aiden Pemberton, who's a cider maker, and Eric Wolf down at Stolen Wolf Distillery. And always good time hanging out with those guys. And of course, JJ Jackson and Amanda were there, and Paul Menta and Jay Coleshoe. And it's always a good time.
Where's Paul Manta located at? Is he in Florida?
Yeah, Paul's down in Key West.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
Key West.
He's got a distillery there too, right?
Yep. Brilliant guy. First legal rum distillery there in Key West. Fantastic distiller, great chef, and a great conversationalist too.
That's right.
He and I really hit it off well.
I was just about to ask you to be a chef too, but you did it for me again. Hey, you were talking about apple brandy a minute ago. Brandy's one of my favorites as well. And where is it? Ozark Moonshine Music Festival. Distiller there gave us, all of us moonshiners that were there, bottles of brandy. This is an apple brandy they made.
Nice.
I love it. It's great. I'm going to do a shot of it right now.
There you go.
We do shots a lot on this show. So
normally I'd be doing them with you, but I've to be honest, I've backed off drinking a little bit the past little while. Not because I had a problem or anything, but just because when you've been in the industry for 11 years, you got to take a break every once in a while. And then I got a little out of hand with it this past weekend. So I'm, I was trying to get rid of the rest of this cold, and sometimes that gets out of hand. So
you're talking about Mount Vernon. Here's a picture of the whole group.
Yeah. Yep, there they all are.
I can't believe there was that many. To be honest with you, I was like, man, that's a lot.
And usually there's not. This was a little bit of a special thing because it was the American whiskey, as opposed to, the apple brandy group was a lot smaller. The rye whiskey groups are usually smaller. They're not usually that many people, but this being special, there were people that we wanted involved in this for sure, to be a part of it and make it something very, very special and unique and different. But when you get that many in Mount Vernon Distillery, it gets a little tight and a little crowded, working around there and doing that whole thing. So
I bet
it's a lot of fun. But
here's a picture with you and Amanda, and I found it funny. I even came up with a comment because she's got this look on her face. Look, you got this stern look at her. She's got this look like, oh shit, I screwed up.
No, she didn't screw up at all. She knows what she's doing, but
well, I know. I'm just trying to be funny.
Yeah. What was going on there was we were talking about holding those stills and active, well, not even active, but passive reflux. So two things are happening in that picture. So if you notice the heads off of my still, that's Helen. I call her my still. That's the big still that no one there ever really likes to run because she traditionally has not made great product. But the reason she doesn't typically make great product is because everybody tries to push her way too hard, and they don't really, they haven't had the chance to really take the opportunity to figure out proper protocols with her. So what I was telling her about Helen, or as I call Helen, because she's a pain in the ass, I actually call her Aztec death goddess is what I call her. But what I was explaining was that head was off because this mash that we were doing, this 4-grain mash, was really thick. And so we were needing to go in there on all the stills and stir the stills till we got them up to a boil. And so everybody has different methods and they have different timings. And so the first time somebody sees a little wisp of steam, they're throwing the head on, they need to go a little bit longer and keep stirring. And that's part of what I was explaining. And the other part of what I was explaining was that even once that's done, what we want to do, because we want to compress some of the heads on this and get a little lighter style spirit, because this was going to go into a used oak barrel as opposed to a new oak barrel, was once that head is on, we want to let that steam come up and hit the head. And once it hits the head, we want to be able to take our hand, and right where the knuckle meets the line arm on that still, you want to be able to lay your hand on that and be able to count to 10 or 12, because at 10 or 12, before it burns, you're setting it right at 135 degrees. If you put your hand up there and you can hold it there for 5 seconds, you're at 145. That's an old French trick. But
Cool.
once you're there, you want to hold that at that knuckle for at least a half an hour, because what that means is all that steam is rolling around in that head and all that condensate's falling back into the still without going over. So I've got active reflux. So once you're there, you got to pull your fire back. If you got an active fire going in that box, you want it down to nothing but coals. Find the cold spot in the box down below and pull all that wood back to that cold spot and let that thing sit there for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, throw some wood on it and get it across the line arm. But yeah, that was the conversation that was happening. So
I think I might be able to put my hand on there longer at higher temperatures. And I'll show you why.
yeah. 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 Well, you know, it's more of a man than I am. I ain't doing that shit.
I don't recommend it. I used to be a magician. It's a magic trick.
Right. They, you know, the thing about distilling the old fashioned way like that is that, and especially those old alembics like that, and those aren't old, they're modern reproductions, but everything, a lot of things were by feel, you know, and
Yeah.
you can keep that as basic as you want to. You can just run it. But if you understand what's happening inside that still, then there's some things you can do like that active or that passive reflux, or, you know, if you want to hit an active reflux on those stills, for example, we've talked about doing this. We've never done it there, but if you want to hit an actual active reflux of those stills, just take you some wet towels and put over the top of it and keep pouring water over the top of the head. Now you've got active reflux. Or put wet towels on the head and take a fan and face that on the head. So
thanks for sharing that. I never knew that.
mm-hmm. Yeah, distilling can be very, very basic, or it can be as advanced as you want to make it, depending on, you know, it's all about the intuition of it and watching what you're doing and that whole thing. So
yeah, totally. And I've learned the bigger the pot still, guys like to run them a lot hotter than what they normally would, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that true for myself. I started off, I just had a little 5-gallon copper still, and I ran it and I got good with it. I moved up to 20-gallon still. Thing was taking forever. I cranked the heat on this.
Yep.
So I kind of get what you're saying about with Helen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of the people that were part of the distilling team, they're traditionally at Mount Vernon. They've been, you know, people who've come in from the farm for, you know, to have extra work outside the summer months. And so they haven't traditionally always been people that have been interested in distilling. They're just interested in hours, but they also want to get home at a decent time. So they push the stills really hard. Now Steve's got a team now that he is hand selected and they know what they're doing. But when I first came there were a lot of them that were just trying to push through it. So
yeah. So what kind of still do you have personally? Or do you like to run off of? I mean, you probably have more than one.
Yeah, I've got several. So I'm a pot still guy. I'm a batch system guy through and through, 100%. And there could be any various number of combinations for a batch still. So I made my name mostly between Copper and Kings and Spirits of French Lick doing straight up double pot still distillation. So no thumpers, no columns, nothing of that nature, just straight up double pot still distillation, stripping run, and then doubling run, done. The only thing that we ever released, you know, in those cases, the only thing that ever touched our liquor was barrel and water, and that was it. At home, I've run anything you can imagine, pretty much. So pot still with thumper, pot still with double thumper. Wayne and I from Ozark Stillworks work together a lot. We design new equipment, so we have
the comments right now.
Yep. So we've got the Mr. Fusion, we've got the Sparrow's Nest, we've got the Shocker Deflator. So I'll run with deflamators, gin baskets, this double thumper system, or not double thumper, inline thumper system that Wayne and I have come up with. It can do a lot of things very similar to what a 3-chamber still can do. In fact, it has more levity than what a 3-chamber does. So it spends everything that's in there spends a lot of time under heat. It's very, very oily. It creates a crazy meniscus on the distillate, holds on to a lot of flavors. I've done steam based distillations, you know, basically making a steamer still. There's not a whole lot I haven't done. Now, my preference It really depends. It's sort of like working on a car, right? You got different tools for different models of cars.
Sure, sure.
If I'm going to make a whiskey or I'm going to make a true brandy, most of the time it's going to be double pot still distillation. For things like sugar shines or sunshine, like what we're doing at Old Homestead Distillery, which is a moonshine based on malted roasted sunflowers,
Nice.
which are related to a good buddy of mine.
Uh-oh. Froze up. Don't freeze up now. Me and Lisa are good, but Alan froze up.
Yep. Let's see.
Might be a connection on his end. Let me look over here in the comments. Trails and Tribs. SY Link. The General. Trails is good. Trails is cool. Oh, man. I think we might have lost Alan. Alan, you might have to log out and come back. Yeah, we might have lost him. Let me kick him out and send him a text. Come back. Oh, he kicked himself out and left. Well, I hope it's an issue that he can resolve and come back. Great guy, full of information. It's like, wow.
My tablet is so far behind you. You're just holding up your cigarette now.
Yeah, mine too. Well, it's not that far behind, but it's pretty far behind. Yeah, Alan just left off of mine.
Yeah, he hasn't left yet.
He kicked himself out.
He's still moving on my side.
Let
But
me see if I can send him the link again in case he needs it. Forget which one I'm at. Here we go. Oh, he's back. We found it.
Hey,
I thought you got mad and left.
right?
No, it just froze up on your end.
Yeah, I don't know what I lost the internet connection for some reason there for a minute. So.
It happens to me sometimes. It's like, damn it.
Yep.
I had a real bad problem. I was interviewing Nick Kalo one day on a podcast. He was one of the first ones.
Mhm.
And I couldn't get on. The whole podcast went. I got on. He goes, well, I got to go.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah, we have that a lot with Distillers Talk, especially going across time zones and stuff like that. But yeah, I was talking about stills there before I left, but I don't say no to anything, and I'll tell you a good example. So I've got another brand I'm working on with my buddy Eric Wolf down at Stolen Wolf Distillery in Pennsylvania, and Stolen Wolf is a phenomenal distillery that I wish more people knew of, and definitely get out and support them. But Eric and his wonderful wife Aviana, I partnered with them to work on a project. So my mom's family, the Wilsons, they came through Pennsylvania before they got to Kentucky, and this is why I also like working in Virginia. The Bishop family all came through Tidewater, Virginia. So I always say, plenty of distillers went from east to west, but very few distillers came back west to go back east. So that's part of me going to Mount Vernon and going to Stolen Wolf. But we launched what we call Wolf and Wilson, which is a colonial era mash bill that Eric and I found in a account book from a shoemaker and distiller of all things. And it's literally just a book of his accounting. But within that book, there was a little pamphlet on distilling in the 1700s.
Wow.
And so it didn't give really proper mash bills, but it would say, like, here's how you roughly set up a distillery. If you take one bushel of rye, 1 bushel of wheat, and I think it was a peck of oats, and mash them in, this will make a good whiskey. So we took that mash bill, and part of the experiment was to go to Stolen Wolf and run on a column still, a continuous column. To be fair, Eric's column is set up quite differently than the low rec Kentucky column stills that I'm used to seeing in Kentucky and elsewhere industrially. And Eric distills much differently than what they do in Kentucky. But I learned a ton running that system, and I would have no problem setting up that system in one of my distilleries, even though column still distillation isn't my normal forte. But it's all about the way Eric runs it and the way Eric designed that still to run. So again, different tools for different projects. So
Yeah, totally agree. But I think what I was asking is, what's your favorite mash build? I know you like brandy, so what's your favorite brandy mash to run?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I got you. So, I like apple mash brandy pretty well. That's an old traditional Southern Indiana thing as well. And peaches. So,
Peaches.
peach in particular here in Southern Indiana, we have a peach variety called the Fleener peach
Huh.
that has been here since at least 1807 that we know of. And this was a major crop for the distilleries that were here in Southern Indiana. It was exported all over the Midwest as well. It was a peach that probably originally came from Virginia with a family called the Fleeners, who were originally out of Maryland, then came to Virginia. And it comes back true from seed. And so I'm actually currently working on with David Shields getting this thing into the Slow Food Arc of Taste. I just got an email from those folks 2 days ago. It's in front of the nominating committee. They just needed some more information, so hopefully that'll get in there. I spent years looking for this thing, and once I found it, I realized how common it was. It grows in fence rows all over the place around here,
Huh.
and anywhere there used to be an old distillery at, if it's not been developed, you'll find those peaches growing around that old distillery. In fact, I know where there's a couple of old distilleries at, or what's left of them. There's what look like little hills all around them. They're not hills. If you dig into them, you'll find what's left of peach pits. It's where they were dumping their peach pits when they were doing their distillation. But yeah, so mash brandies are really what I love to make. This is what I love to drink. They're not that challenging to make as a mash or a ferment or a distillation quite often.
That's I tell people that all the time, Alan. That they ask me if I would make this or make that, and I tell them, look, if it's not something I'm going to drink, I'm not going to make it.
Right. I guess at this point I like doing the more complicated things as far as like the work aspect of it, just as a challenge.
Sure.
Or being able to work off of instinct, like, will this work? Do I think this will work? Why do I think it'll work versus why do I not think it'll work? I've done some pretty strange things over the years. I've done some pachugas and things like that where I've taken agave spirits, and then actually the first one I did was a rabbit pachuga where we actually put a rabbit inside the still, and so that was really interesting. It worked out really well. I did one with beef bone, which it was a pain in the ass clean the still up. I can say that much. But
when you say that, I had a flashback of a guy on Master Distillers. He did a turkey. He put a turkey in the pot.
Yeah. Those are all very, very cool old things. Looks like my froze up on my end with video. I apologize for that. I don't know what we got going on.
As long as we can talk.
Yeah, they still can hear me. That's the main thing. So I ain't much to look at otherwise anyways. So, but I bet what I've been doing a lot of the past few years, and what I'm doing a lot of this over at Old Homestead, is fermentations with botanicals directly in the fermentation.
Nice.
Prior to distillation. And I've been having a lot of fun with that and the interplay of how those botanicals get extracted in a lower amount of alcohol before distillation. Really able to pull off some really interesting flavors, especially using that as a base to make liqueurs out of afterwards. So right now, for example, we're doing some rye based sugar shine. It's a malt rye and sugar and raisins and a little sunflower. And then in that mash, we actually have some sweet orange peel and some lemon peel. Wow. And some nutmeg and some Ceylon cinnamon and a little bit of cacao nibs. And so that makes a really nice base to make some liqueurs out of.
Alfredo and I hooked up about a month ago, probably a little longer than that. They're in Bartow, Florida. And we went to a bar there. The bartender was an alchemist. And I'll tell you what, he was good. He had tried some of my stuff. He tasted it and he goes, hold on a second. He reaches over in his little bottles and stuff and he pours a little bit of this, add a little ice to it, shook it up, gave it to me. I was like, son of a bitch. And it really came out really good. He grows his own herbs and does all that stuff himself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then he turned around and did it with Alfredo's. I'd be damned if he didn't make Alfredo's better. Dude.
I like to do a lot of that stuff, and I really like working with botanicals as well, especially on the alchemical side of things. Now, I have to be careful the way that I say this here, and I'll preface this as I'm not saying this as Alan Bishop, the distiller of any particular company. I'm saying this as Alan Bishop, the proprietor of One Piece at a Time and the Alchemist Cabinet. There was for a long time, up until the 1800s, the art of being a distiller also included the art of being able to make medicines, specifically spagyric style medicines and perfumes, etc. And a lot of those botanical based spirits, not only are they complex to make and they're also complex in their flavors, such as absinthe, etc., but they would have at one point in time been classified as what you would have thought of as a functional alcohol. In other words, they had a very specific place, and that they were being used as either a medicament, or they might have been being used as a aperitif or a digestif, so something to either raise your hunger or to help with your digestion. They have physiological responses in the human body, and obviously you have to be careful with that. But
that's what wormwood does, right?
Yep, wormwood's a big part of that. So wormwood specifically is an anti-parasitic. It's also a liver tonic. It has some digestive issues, but absinthe more so than that. It works on digestion in a few different ways. It actually works with your liver and also works within your stomach, but also works within your brain. It's a very specific spagyric response that you have to that, and really an old school homeopathic medicine. And the history of it's really interesting because of the three big botanical spirits, absinthe, gin, and aquavit, absinthe is the only one that sort of stands apart because the aquavites and the gins really trace their history back to Salerno, Italy. And absinthe is sort of like that, but wormwood use in alcohol goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, for one thing. And then secondarily, what you'll see with absinthe in particular is that you have that sort of chemist mindset coming from the Salerno background, the medical school of Italy, coming into the Swiss Alps, where it meets a very distinctly what you might think of as a green witch or a granny witch culture. Women who are living in the mountains who very much so understand what the plants in the mountains do and how they work, who are already taking brandy and making tinctures at the time. And absinthe actually started off as a tincture. It wasn't a fully distilled product. It was basically brandy packed with these botanicals. And it wasn't until a little later on that it becomes actually distilled into the brandy itself. So even from a production standpoint, with something like a gin or an aquavit, you're using a decent amount of botanicals. But with a true absinthe, you're using almost as many botanicals by volume as what you are alcohol by volume, to where you're almost dealing with a solid state distillation.
Wow.
So it's sort of that, and some of the other alpine liqueurs kind of stand on their own.
Speaking of the absinthe, I have a picture of that here.
Yeah, that is the short-term effect absinthe. So that is a American style absinthe. And what I mean by American style is that, gin and aquavit got Americanized, but absinthe did not. So it has all the traditional absinthe botanicals and all the traditional sort of amounts, and then a number of more Americanized botanicals as well, including marigold, but specifically the coloration comes from maize morado from Peru, which is the purple, and maize morado is water soluble. It's also just turns out that it also reacts to UV light. So,
right.
Which surprised me, but it certainly does. And then the one that was sitting next to that is the 9 Herb Charm, which is another herbal botanical liqueur.
And those what you were talking about, they're 100% herbal, right?
Yeah. So the base is the base alcohol for those is one of our sunshines, which is going to be malted roasted sunflowers and oats and raisins and sugar. And then the absinthe I think that absinthe has got 14 botanicals in it. For 17 gallons of absinthe, 17 gallons for distillation, that still is over half full of botanicals when I distill it. Yeah, the 9 Herb Charm that was next to it, that is that's based on an old
I'll show it again.
Norse-inspired poem about Odin. He's basically giving a cure to some kind of disease, but he doesn't specify what. And he lists these 9 sacred botanicals. So I took those 9 sacred botanicals and turned them into a botanical distillate that was kind of inspired by chartreuse. But it has those 9 sacred botanicals in it, which would include apples, chervil, a couple of wild mints. What else is in there? I can't remember off the top of my head, but again, the base for that one, actually, that was an oat base, and we did a lot of the botanicals in the fermentation. That's a whole crazy thing. We did the botanicals in the fermentation, distilled it, redistilled it, or not, didn't redistill it, I'm sorry, distilled it, and then we made a coloration tincture that went into the alcohol that was distilled, filter that out, and then we make an herbal tea to proof it down with. So it's a multi-step process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm
just digging holes for myself at work is what I'm doing.
I wanted to make a comment. There's a couple of comments on here. Scott Leager, he asked, where in Indiana are you? He's in Sullivan.
Okay, yeah. So we're in Crawford County is where we're at. So we are, I don't know, we're an hour and 10 sort of northwest of Louisville, Kentucky, in between French Lick and Tell City, essentially.
I'm sending my drone right now.
There you go.
Alfredo's, he's been watching for a little while. I was just talking about him. I'll bring him up on in a little bit after I finish with the interview. But he says, Alan, you have a plethora of knowledge.
Thank you.
And, I've never had absinthe. Never had it. And I knew you made it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go get some absinthe. I'm going to have it tonight. So
yeah,
this is my first try of
it. Which one did you get?
Wow, I like it.
Okay, Absinthe. Yeah, so the distiller of that is I hope I get this right. I think he's still the owner of it. He was Ted Bro. You guys might have seen him on Moonshine Master Distiller. But Ted has a line of absinthes called the Jade line. And so the Jade line, if you can get a hold of those, they're phenomenal. They're reproductions of pre-ban absinthes, mostly of French and Swiss extraction.
Write that down because I like this.
Well, if you like that, just wait. Some of those Jades, there's my favorite, and it's you wouldn't want to drink much of it, only a glass or so, because it's got a perception of sweetness to it that's crazy. There's one called the Edouard. Edouard, and it is the single most decadent absinthe that I've ever had in my life. It doesn't have any sugar to it itself naturally, but you would swear that it does. I mean, you have a good meal and sit down and have a glass of that. That's your dessert. You're done. You're finished. So.
That's good. I like it. I like that a lot. A long time ago, I didn't like gin whatsoever. I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand to be around it. And then I met Lisa Lowry, and I tried her gin, and I was like, I'm hooked.
Well, that's good. That's good. Gin's a growing category in the United States for sure.
It is. I've read about that. It was about 2 weeks ago they were talking about that.
Yeah. Even with this downturn in brown spirits, with whiskey being down and bourbon being down, gin's still growing. Agave spirits are growing, and not just mezcal and tequila, but American agave spirits as a category is growing. It's still a small category, but it's growing. So,
yeah. Let's see. We did talk about the almanac, the paranormal. One thing we didn't talk about.
Stories from the Stead. Yeah.
So I like these. They're cool.
Yeah, I enjoy telling those stories. I consider myself a storyteller as much as anything else. And those were just a little limited set of things I did. I might do more of those in the future. I've written a lot about the history of distilling here in Southern Indiana and talked a lot about it. I have an old website. It was the alchemistcabinet.wordpress.com. That's got a lot of the Indiana stuff on it, but give you a little give the audience a little rundown of where I'm from. Bearing in mind that my family, they're all from Kentucky, but I consider myself a Hoosier. I was born in Indiana. I'm proud to be from Indiana. You know, I would like for there to be someone famous other than damn Johnny Cougar or Larry Bird from my part of Indiana would be great. I don't know how we got stuck with the two assholes we got stuck with, but it is what it is. But the region of Indiana I'm from is this sort of south central Indiana region that was called the Black Forest of Southern Indiana. It's made up of 6 counties: Washington, Orange, Lawrence, Crawford, Harrison, and Perry counties. And most of the settlers who came here, as I said earlier, they could trace their ancestry back to the Palatinate in Germany. So we're talking about the region where almost all of Grimm's fairy tales were from, where they were recorded from. So they had a long history of superstition. They brought that here with them. Originally, they came in through Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, the Carolinas, came down the Monongahela River to the Ohio River, settled in Indiana, or they came up following Makaji Calloway through Boonesboro, Kentucky, and then into Indiana. My wife's family has been here since the beginning of time. In fact, I'm pretty sure my daughter's going to have to go to another county to find a boyfriend when she starts dating. I'm pretty sure everyone here is my wife's cousin in some way, shape, or form. But the long and short of it is they knew from the earliest days Indiana was going to be a distilling territory, even before it was ever a state. And the reason they knew that is because they knew that the land here in the southern part of the state was incredibly fertile, and up north it is as well. But they knew that this was going to be a huge grain state and that there was a lot of limestone in this region. So therefore you're going to have a lot of caves in this region. And so mills and water navigation are going to be incredibly important. And what that did is it set up this land speculation where a lot of people on the East Coast that had money would come to Indiana and they would buy pieces of property with cave springs to develop mills and distilleries. And the reason they were doing that is because the mills were sort of the hubs of local civilization at that time. They were really agricultural trade centers is what they were. Now they tell us in Indiana history that, the settlers had to have the mills because they didn't have a way to grind their corn. That's not true. Settlers were incredibly intelligent. Most of them had a way to grind their own corn. What they didn't have, however, was money. And the mills represented the ability to create products that could be shipped out and then money brought back. So what happened was you had this development very early on of this distilling-based society here in Southern Indiana, where the mill is the center of it. And you would go in the fall of the year and you would take your excess grains or your excess apples. And of course, to claim your land here in Southern Indiana as part of the territory, you actually had to plant an apple tree on the property. It's like a wedding ring to the property. It was to show it was to show the government that you were serious about being there long enough to have that investment in that apple tree, right? So they would take everything to the mills and they would trade, and they worked on a very specific German system, which was an 8-5 system, which is you take 8 shares of something to the mill. And once that is processed, you get 5 shares back and the miller keeps the other 3 shares. Well, what you get back, you don't need ground grain. What you need back is either going to be money or it's going to be alcohol. Because it was considered rude or incongruent not to offer a guest a drink at that time if they stopped by your homestead to help you with something like a log rolling or husking corn, etc. Or you might get it back as pork, or you might get it back as flour, various different things. And the miller doesn't really need the extra stuff for himself because he's got his own stuff. But what he wants to do is he wants to make whiskey and brandy in the fall of the year and then take all the mash from that whiskey or brandy and feed it out to his cattle or his hogs, and then take all that extra meat that he has and all the secondary flour and cornmeal that he has and wait for the spring floods to come and put all that on a flatboat, send it back down south and sell it off to all the ports along the Ohio and Mississippi all the way down to New Orleans. And then he's going to walk back, or if he makes enough money, he's going to actually buy a horse or a mule and bring that back up the Natchez Trace, which was incredibly, incredibly dangerous. A lot of people don't realize this, but that song, Yo Ho Ho and a Bottle of Rum, that actually does not belong to Disney. Every time Disney uses that song, they actually have to pay the Filson Historical Society a royalty, because that song was actually written by river pirates at Cave In Rock near St. Louis is where that song came from. So very, very dangerous occupation. But nonetheless, pretty much all these Germans drank. Pretty much everybody in Indiana drank up until the 1840s when you see the temperance movement start to grow. A lot of these early distillers that came into this region Their families had been distillers before them. So they were going to be primarily farm distillers distilling in the fall of the year. Or another class of people that I'll tell you about real quick were the preacher distillers. So it sounds incongruent, but it's definitely not.
Hey, it's what put the steeples there, right?
It's exactly what put them there. So the preacher distillers were mostly primitive Baptist, Christian, Campbellite Christian, and they all operated out of a local place here called Old Blue River at that time. And they didn't have any churches. They were holding services in people's houses or outside, things of that nature, traveling from town to town, place to place by horseback, last rites, weddings, all that sort of stuff. And didn't take them long to realize people here like to drink. Well, if I could make a little alcohol, I could get some money to build some churches out of. And then, in the community, a preacher is supposed to be a shepherd of his flock. So one of the ways that you shepherd your flock is you watch and see who has problems. And if, somebody has a problem on Saturday, you know who you need to talk to on Sunday. And if they have a problem after that, you know who's not going to get to buy that stuff again. And if there's a problem after that, you run them out of the community. And that was cool. One of the ways the preachers took care of their communities was through the control of alcohol here in Southern Indiana. And most of the churches that were built here in the 6-county region were originally built from alcohol money. The congregations nowadays don't like to hear that, but it's the absolute truth. One of the big preacher distillers in this region in Washington County who built 6 churches here in Washington County was a man named Reverend Thomas Green. And Thomas Green had a little bit of a reputation about himself. Once you get up in the 1850s, it's no longer popular to be a preacher distiller because the temperance movement's come along. And so the kids would take the hymnal books and they'd go to sing songs. They'd change lyrics to make fun of the preachers. So one of the poems that has survived, luckily for us, about Reverend Thomas Green, who is a distiller out at Bexmill, Indiana, is Tommy Green, prettiest man I've ever seen, Miller, Stiller, Soul Saver, and Sinner Skinner. And so they're basically making fun of his pride of being a preacher distiller and also of his hypocrisy of being a preacher distiller. But the other thing that you have that's happening at this time in Indiana is that there was a lot of, I'm trying to think what they call it. John Chapman was a follower of it, Johnny Appleseed. Basically, there was a lot of Anabaptist, Mennonite, Amish, that sort of influence was happening at the time here in Southern Indiana. And so what you'll see is in Indiana, there wasn't a lot of tree grafting that happened until late 1800s. You weren't really cloning trees. And the reason for that is because these people sort of looked at it as if you were trying to clone a tree or you're actively trying to improve a crop of some sort, it's almost like you're spitting in the face of God and saying that God didn't do a good enough job when he created this. So what you're seeing is a lot of people at that time who are planting orchards from seed, hence the Fleener peach. The Fleener peach came here with John and Abraham Fleener, 1807 roughly. Their father, Nicholas, had been a distiller in Maryland and Virginia. They came up here, at least John did, in 1807. First man in Indiana to have a divorce because his first wife didn't want to move with him. He outlived 2 other wives. He had 25 children, 24 of which made it to adulthood, 2 of which lived to be over 100 years old. One son lived to be 105 years old, and one daughter lived to be 102 years old. But Abraham brought that Fleener peach with him, supposedly from Virginia. Now, there's another story that gets told later on where Abraham tells the newspaper that, and he doesn't say whether this happened in Virginia or Indiana, make it more confusing. They lived in Washington County, Virginia, and Washington County, Indiana. So he does say Washington County, but it doesn't tell which one. And he says that seed originally came from a tramp or a hobo knocked on his door late one winter's evening, and the guy, just wearing worn out clothes, didn't have anywhere to stay, and so he said that if Abraham would consider 2 peach seeds worth $1, would he let him stay in the house that evening? And then, so that's how he tells the story where the peaches came from. And I kind of prefer that version. I think it's kind of cool. This, wondering.
I like it. That's cool. That's
poor
awesome.
Man giving out these seeds. But, so what you have is by the time you get to the 1850s, I'll wrap this part up real quick. I apologize. But by the time you get to the 1850s, you'll see, if you look at the agricultural census books of those 6 counties, each of those 6 counties has upwards of 150,000 apple trees per county. Damn. Now, we never were big on hard apple cider here, these trees are not being selected to be eaten out of hand. Even if they were, there's no good shipping route. There's no real locks or levees on the Ohio River at this time. So shipping down the Ohio is pretty much impossible, except during the flood season. In fact, in the summertime, most of the Ohio River was only about 2 inches deep. A lot of people don't realize that, but very shallow river during the summertime. So these are being used specifically for two things. They're being used for brandy, and then the offalls of the trees that are hitting the ground are being used to raise cattle, which are then being used to make butter and milk. So those are kind of the two big things that we're doing at that particular time. Hold on just a second, guys.
Yep.
All right, sorry about that.
No,
So the long and short of it is, you have this thing that turns into sort of an industrial farm distilling culture here in southern Indiana, where from 1858 to 1914, in those 6 counties, there were 150 plus continuous legal operating semi-continuous legally operating distilleries at that time. We became the apple brandy capital of the entire world. We actually have accounts of apple brandy from Indiana being shipped into Normandy, France, where Calvados is made, which means that even at that time in northern France, the northern Frenchmen would rather drink our brandy from Indiana than the brandy they were making there in Normandy, France.
that's something.
But it was a very different style of brandy. It was an apple mash brandy. So the way that we would make an apple mash brandy at that time was, you're basically taking as many apples as you can that will fit into a hogshead barrel of 120 gallons. You're grinding those things up, and then you're adding just enough water to start the process of fermentation, but you're using boiling limestone water, essentially. So you're getting the benefit of limestone water with all the nutrients, etc., from the cave springs here, plus the entirety of the flavor of that apple. And then every bit of that is also going into the still.
Cool. I wanted to catch up real quick on the comments. Alfredo made a comment. You were pointing out earlier on your absence on how it does the luminescence.
Yeah,
Alfredo does a bamboo rum that does the same thing.
Interesting.
He says in the comments, he says, Alan, I want to learn more about your UV illumination in a distilled spirit. Our bamboo spirits has an illumination property. Joe Justice tells me it's an amino acid.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know. I only just took those 2 photos at the distillery because I happen to have a UV flashlight with me.
I have a picture of it, but it won't let me bring it up on this podcast. I was going to show it to you earlier when I was showing those others of yours. I was going to show you Alfredo's bamboo rum, how it illuminates too.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I don't know exactly what causes it. I would say that's probably right. The amino acids, I would say with the absinthe in particular, those plant oils are really, really heavy in that absinthe. Same with the 9-herb charm. And I'm sure there's some refractivity that is happening with that UV light based on those plant oils in particular. Because otherwise with UV light, typically the only things that will light up would be either refractive things such as different types of precious stones, or like you can use them to see pollen and things of that nature, typically living things. Actually, you can use them to look at yeast as well, which is kind of interesting. That's why I bought the UV flashlight in the first place. So
that's cool. Yeah, I got one when I was doing a little growing on my own.
Mm-hmm.
You have one other question here. Mike Frayne asked, how is Dale?
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for asking, Mike.
Good question, Mike.
My dad is doing well. I actually have to call him here in a minute. Today was his first day of physical therapy, so he probably won't answer because he's probably asleep. So I'm sure he's good and sore today, but he was feeling pretty good earlier today when I talked to him, and yesterday when I talked to him. So he's recovering nicely from what I can tell, and he plans on getting back to the distillery and being able to work at least a part-time schedule at the distillery. So
cool, awesome. Glad to hear that. Just a couple more things. We'll wrap it up. I'll bring Alfredo up. I think he wants to talk to you. It's easier to talk in person than it is to type it in the comments. There's a book out, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm so sorry. The Yellow King.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right? I'm not saying it right, am I?
So I use a hashtag called the King in Yellow, and the King in Yellow is an old concept related to some of the Cthulhu mythology and those sorts of old horror literature things. I have two books currently out: The Alchemist Cabinet Volume 1 and Volume 2, as well as the Alchemist, as well as the damn it, my brain's not working. The Almanac. But I have a book that I'm working on currently that is called the Theriac, and that'll bring it's a fiction book with nonfiction elements. So it will bring a lot of the spirituality and a lot of the distilling and a lot of the history together. So it's based on a distiller traveling through southern Indiana in the very early days of southern Indiana, and he'll take on an apprentice, and he's training that apprentice as a distiller. But what that apprentice doesn't realize is that he's also training him in some of the old mystery religion stuff and some of the philosophy that might cause him to look at the world in a different way. And it's meant to be read like that, or will be meant to be read like that by people who are sort of taking that alchemical journey with distillation. It's a long ways out from being finished, but it's something that I am currently working on.
Now, I read about that and when I was doing some research on you, and then I saw this picture when you were at Mount Vernon. Is that same book?
No, so that is a very good friend of mine out at Mount Vernon, and that gentleman there is he man, and this is a crazy thing about Mount Vernon. So that gentleman there, Timothy Del Walker, is a crazy talented, crazy smart individual when it comes to history. And so he has a lot of specialties, one of which is colonial era chocolate, which is a pretty interesting thing in and of itself. But another is the book that I had in my hand there, and I don't have it in front of me. I can't recall the title of it off the top of my head. That book was a book that he wrote that is all about the Underground Railroad, but on the oceanfront side of things.
Okay.
And he gifted me that book, and I really, really appreciated it. Really gracious gentleman. He's actually sending me some colonial style chocolate right now to play with for some alcohol. So that's something to look forward to in the future.
Cool. That's cool. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about and touch on base, because I know you're all about your hometown and where you live and all the elements from that, all the crops, everything like that. You also just recently built a clay pot still.
Yes, because I need more things to do with my time.
And that, I believe, is a running still.
It is. It is. Yeah, that one worked. You know,
I tried to. I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt for a second. You had a lot of videos. I could not download any of them on here. And one of them was you were running that. And I was watching the drip. I was like, hell yeah.
Yep. I am always amazed when something actually works the way that it's supposed to. So I'm not much of a still builder. I've tinkered around with copper a little bit here and there, but I've wanted to do this clay still thing for a long time, and I'll tell you why. So there's a couple reasons. The first reason is I'm real interested in Oaxaca, Mexico, for many reasons, and Mexico in general. The distillation that happens there, especially ancestral mezcal distillation using clay pot stills. There's some evidence that has come forward in the past couple of years in the archaeological record that those clay pot stills in South America and Central America actually predate European contact as we currently recognize it.
Wow.
They may have been brought over here specifically by Asiatic peoples that were island hopping at the time. And there's some evidence of that both in China and in Peru. So if you guys are familiar with Araucana chickens or Americanas, Easter eggers, lay green and blue eggs.
Yeah.
So the true Araucana that has the tufts and the muffs and lays a true sky blue egg, they also are missing a tail vertebrae. And that's usually a sign of inbreeding depression, which means that those chickens were kept in very small lots for a very long time. It looks like those came into Peru originally, probably brought by these same island hopping peoples. There's also a type of corn in China called waxy corn or glutinous corn. That is also a triple recessive trait that shows up due to inbreeding, which means that corn had to be in that region of China for a very long time. Well, it turns out that in that region, they often find what look like clay pot stills that look like Asiatic clay pot stills. Now, I'm also interested in clay pot stills because the early alchemists, most of them couldn't afford glass pot stills, so they were making very simple clay contraptions. And so I've wanted to do this for a long time. And it just turns out that I mentioned something about, looking for clay one time on a lark. I mentioned this in front of Tyler Richardson, my still handed at Old Homestead. And Tyler's like, well, I have this giant pile of red clay at my house. And I'm like, oh, of course you do. So now I can't, I have to be like, well, all right, can you bring me some clay? So about every 2 weeks, he brings me this big thing of clay.
Cool.
And because I can't do anything the easy way. The easy way would be, well, let's go to the damn art store
Right.
and go buy clay. But no, I have to be like, no, I got to get the sand out of this shit.
That's
And put
cool. That's cool.
It is, and it's been a lot of fun. And I will tell you, it's also been about the most heartbreaking thing to do because for the 3 that have been successful, there have been about 6 that have busted either in the fire or after firing. Because I'm doing this as primitive as well. I'm doing the same way the Native Americans here were doing it, open pit firing, which means that about 40% of anything you put in there is not going to make it. It's just not. And sometimes that's due to the fire. Sometimes it's due to the weather. Sometimes it's due to my shitty pottery because I don't know what I'm doing and I'm teaching myself. But
that's how we learn the best, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I've got 3 that are currently working. And part of the thesis here is, okay, I have pushed distillation with batch still systems, pot still systems, really, really hard in the very advanced direction over the years, to where I feel like people would have a hard time stumping me with any piece of equipment. Like that's not a brag. I've done the work, right? I feel pretty good about that. What I am curious about is how primitive now can I take it, right? How far back down the ladder can you go and still make a decent product? That's one part of it. The other part of it is just to be able to be like, hey, you know what? You can call yourself a master distiller all you want, but can you raise a pot still up from the ground with your bare hands?
I love it.
It's just a humble brag. And also I do a lot of, I've kind of hinted at it. I do a lot of spagyric medicines and tinctures and that stuff. And, so I'll be using those clay pot stills this summer to make a lot of essential oils and hydrosols and that kind of stuff as well. So
cool.
And then when they bust, they get turned into flower pots.
There you go.
Because you got to keep mama happy.
You can bust them up even more and use them as a soil base for your orchids.
Yeah. Here's another cool thing. So none of them go to waste either, because the ones that like completely bust in the fire. So when you make that clay, that raw clay, it's so funny because you work so hard to clean it, and then you undo your work because you have to have a certain amount of temper to it. Right. So, and that temper can be sand or various different things, but you can also take the fired clay and grind it back up and use it as temper. So any of them that bust, I just grind back up and put back in. So
cool. Yeah, I got some pictures I want to share. I'll run through them kind of quickly. This is at Mount Vernon, just some pictures I had that I downloaded.
Yep. That was us screening mash, because it was we could have ran all of the solids in the still, but it was a little thicker than the rye whiskey usually is. So, and because we leave the bran in with the oats, so we at least pulled the bran cap off and got that out of there,
Run back to the comments real quick. Mike Friend says, what is their horizontal still at Neely Family Distilling?
Oh, the Dijon still, I think DEGAANS. So you'd have to ask Royce for sure. He calls it his absinthe still, and that's what he's making his absinthe on. I think, and again, you'd have to ask him. I believe that was originally an aquavit and a cordial still is what I think that originally was. Set up very similar to an absinthe still, of course, but again, you'd have to ask Royce to really get the answer on that.
Jason Acosta in the comments asked, would a clay still give off flavors?
So yeah, that's the ironic part, right? Because I didn't know shit about working with clay. Uh, the other reason I'm obsessed with this Oaxaca connection, though, I say this before I answer your question, is because when you look at Oaxaca, the cool thing is these are all still farm distillers, and they have a lot in common with what was happening in Indiana. You know, they're going on the young side, they're going 7 years from the field, right? So you have to wait 7 years for an apple tree, you have to wait 7 years for an agave before you can do anything with it. And they also very heavily incorporate their religion into their distillation. So a lot of them, of course, are Catholic. So you'll see, like on top of the roasting pits, they'll cover the top of the roasting pit, and then they'll put a cross at the top of the roasting pit. Some of them actually have their own shrines actually within the distillery too. So there's an interest for me between the way that the Hoosier family apple brandy distillers were with their religiosity and the way that was happening in Oaxaca. But back to the point about the flavor of the clay pot still. So when I first started doing this, I reached out to a friend of mine, Steve Coombs, who spent a lot of time down around Oaxaca, and is really into the mezcal thing. He's a great writer about spirits here in the Louisville, Kentucky area. And I asked him, I said, do they use a glaze or anything on these? Because most glazes, if they come in contact with acids, are poisonous. And he's like, no, I don't think they do, but let me ask around. And I got thinking, like, well, how the hell do you seal that up? Because clay, terracotta is porous, you know? So he talked to a guy that really knew a lot about the production side and said, no, they don't use any glazes on them because, you know, just like having a copper still, why would you want anything between the copper and the alcohol? Which I got that. But I also, the other part of that is they did used to tin the inside of stills. That way, if you ran gin, the copper wouldn't absorb the oils and then taint your whiskey. But I got the point. So the point actually is that, yes, it does carry some minerality with it, and it should carry some minerality with it. That's part of the reason for using the clay pot still. And what I found out was that the way that you actually seal those up is that you don't put a glaze on them. It is natural for them to weep just a little bit. And the way that you ideally seal them up is by taking some kind of starch and boiling it in water inside that pot. So you just take, a couple spoonfuls of flour and some water and you boil it, and that starch works its way into all the pores and clogs those pores up. And I actually think that this is part of why they do, not only for festivals, but why they also do pachuga, because those clay pots, they can last anywhere from, if you look it up, even in Mexico, they can last from 2 runs to 2 weeks to 2 years before they bust. But I think what they're doing is in the fall, they'll make pachuga. And I also suspect when they're making that pachuga, because they're using various different starchy components and fruits and meat, I bet that's when they're also sealing their new stills, is when they make that pachuga.
Interesting. That's cool. What's going on here? Stoking the fire?
So this gentleman here is oh man, his name is slipping me, and I do apologize for it. He is a vintage whiskey collector, originally from Eastern Kentucky. He and his group brought a number of pre-prohibition bottles of rye whiskey, bourbon, etc. down there. I think he was a anesthesiologist before he retired. And so we were talking about his experiences growing up in Eastern Kentucky and my experiences visiting Eastern Kentucky as a kid, as well as growing up with my grandparents, etc. And just good conversation.
Cool. Awesome. Looks like you guys are having a group meeting here.
Oh, this is so this is us waiting on somebody to get there to unlock the main door. So that was from
Okay.
that was Amanda. Bring it back up again. I'll tell you who that is.
Yeah.
So that's Amanda, Jake Holshoe, the great Mark Meltonville, and then Paul Menta. So we're waiting around. Well, they're waiting around. Meanwhile, I'm over there. I got 2 cups of coffee and a cigarette because there's not enough nicotine or caffeine in the world ever. So.
Oh boy, my shadow popped in here. He's always calling shots, so I'm gonna have to do a shot. Bear with me. I'm gonna do this apple brandy. It's good stuff. Came out of Missouri.
Nice. You ever have any of Woodhat's products?
Yeah.
Gary's a very good friend of mine. I absolutely love Gary Hine. As a matter of fact, I talked to Gary on the phone the other day. I think it was Sunday. You'll laugh at this. He did a interview on YouTube for one of the big channels, and on the YouTube channel, I guess he said, I can't remember how I phrased it. He messaged me and he goes, "Hey, give me a call. I have an apology to make." And I'm like, "What the hell does Gary have to apologize to me about?" Right. So I called him. He's like, "Yeah, I was doing this interview and I got talking." And he goes, "I said, I'm the only distiller in the United States that breeds corn for distillation specifically." And he goes, "I got done with it. I thought, well, damn it. Alan's going to be mad because he does that too. And I didn't mention him." And I was like, "I'm not worried. It's not on my radar, Gary, but thank you for the phone call, buddy. I appreciate it." Yep. He's part of a group. He doesn't know he's a part of a group of that I call Distillers for Belt Alternatives. You ever notice, that everybody either has overalls or suspenders.
Yeah.
So, me and Gary are trying to make the suspender thing work out, right? You got the guys with the overalls, and then you got the Todd Leopolds with the coveralls. Me and Gary out there rocking the suspenders.
I came across this one. I fell in love with this one. Tell me what this is. I gotta know.
Yeah, so that is not the first one that they built for Mount Vernon, but I think that was made at the same time by Vendome. So that is a replica of a still the Smithsonian had from the colonial era. So here's a really cool story. The first one they made for Mount Vernon for the reenactment for the recreation of Mount Vernon is actually upstairs at Mount Vernon. When they built that thing, Vendome wouldn't guarantee it because they didn't know how it would work, if it would work, etc. And so there were a lot of the Kentucky Distillers Association involved. There were a couple guys that made the mash. I think Chris Morris was involved in that down at Brown Foreman and a couple other guys. Well, then it came time, like somebody has to test this still down in Kentucky. I love telling this story because this guy does not get near enough credit. So Mr. Jerry Dalton, who is one of my heroes and also a very dear friend of mine, Jerry Dalton is the only non-Beam family member to ever be the master distiller of Jim Beam Distilling Company.
Wow.
And so because nobody else would run this pot still, Jerry Dalton took this pot still out into the parking lot of the Beam facility and ran this pot still. And kudos to Jerry. The great thing about this is Jerry had never run a pot still before in his life. He'd only ever run a semi-automated column still. And he never ran a pot still again after that. That's the only pot still that Jerry Dalton ever ran. And so for me, not only it being a recreation of that time period and being at Mount Vernon, but the fact that Jerry Dalton ran it, and it's the only one he ever ran, that makes it that much more special. So,
hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
good story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
I got one more picture that I came across. Actually, I got a bunch, but I'm going to wrap this up and wait on. I know he's waiting backstage patiently. I came across this one. I like this one. I just got to share it with everybody.
Yeah. Well, that was a thing that happened a lot way back when. That was during my
fuck you guys! I'm taking my whiskey and going home.
and my chicken. That was during. There was a lot of chaos in my life at that time. I was trying to get out of Spirits of French Lick at the time to work on some other things, and so there was that whole time period is well documented in a movie that I believe is still available on Amazon called The Alan Bishop Experience, that was filmed by Bo Cumberland.
I'll have to watch that. I haven't seen it.
Just a giant shit show of a documentary for sure, but it was a great time with good people. That was a message that was sent to it was sent to another distiller who has ridden my coattails one time too many, and he knew exactly who he was. Now the little rooster there, I'll tell you a funny story about that little guy. So that was a little bandy rooster that I had. I like to keep a bandy rooster around. Because they're mean. If they got a little fighting cock in them, that's even better because I like to kind of emasculate them. So I'll pick him up and pet him and just piss him off. But now that one got to where it was my buddy and it would follow me around. And I was sitting outside in the yard the day that picture was taken. I was drinking Old Grandad bottled and bond, and I'd set it down and I was doing something, and that little shit came over and stuck his beak down in my whiskey. Oh, that's funny. He'll never do that again. He turned around and he kept coming back. That chicken was getting drunk off of Old Grandad. So the rest of the night, me and the chicken just hung out, man. It just he became like my parrot basically. And then
Oh, yeah.
of course something killed him because that's the way that always works. So
I had something similar happen where my girlfriend at the time had a beagle. This son of a bitch loved beer.
yep.
And he did. And he would wait for you to set that damn thing down. He'd go there and knock it down and start lapping it up.
Yeah, my dad's buddy growing up, he had a boxer when I was a kid, and that boxer liked Southern Comfort.
Well, it pissed me off one time. It happened one time, and it just pissed me off because I got to clean up this mess. And I said, you know what? Fuck you. And I went got a bowl and I poured him a beer.
Here you
He
go.
got drunk, and I felt so bad afterwards because he went into convulsions and shit.
Oh yeah.
I was freaking out. I was like, I killed this damn dog.
Well, I'll tell you one more quick white trash redneck Southern Indiana story that you'll laugh at. So, you know, it's not uncommon to feed your spent mash out to your animals if you got a farm, especially if you're doing some moonshining.
Right.
But now, you know, most of us that are distilling at home, we're not putting grain in a still, so we're not getting the alcohol out of it. And that's fine in small amounts. But I will tell you, I have accidentally killed a few chickens via alcohol poison. I think they get hypothermia is what actually happens.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I learned my lesson on that. But I will tell you the funniest damn thing I ever saw was I was raising pigs. I had they were mostly Cooney Coon potbelly crosses, but they had some Russian Razorback in them. And this Russian Razorback, we called him Winehead because the guy that brought him to me, a guy named Timmy Hortonberry, who's kind of a Pekin legend, he would run around here in the wintertime with cut off shorts and sandals and no shirt. And he looks like Rob Zombie. He's got a big long beard, long hair. Pulled up to my house one day with this pig in the back of his truck. And he said, told me he brought me the pig and he had to get it out of the truck. Old Ford, beat up Ford step-side truck. And he goes, because I'm on my way to a David Allan Coe concert. And I was like, God damn, you can't make this shit up. Like, this is the most Pekin thing that could possibly ever happen, right? So we named him Winehead because that's what Timmy's nickname was. Anyways, Winehead liked to eat mash, corn mash. And I made the mistake one night. I was in a hurry. I went down there and dumped the whole entirety of a barrel out in the pig lot. And he come running over there and he's grunting and everything, looked at me just happy as hell. He starts eating that corn mash and I leave and go do what I'm doing, come back home. I go out the next morning and that pig is sitting in the same spot he was sitting in when I left him. And he's eating like 3/4 of this corn mash. He looked at me and he goes, oh. I said, okay, I got ready to move. And he was mad. I reached over, I pet him. I thought he fell over. He got back up. And I thought I'd killed him. Well, he went running and he hit the gate and he fell down, hit the gate head first. I called my wife and I was like, I'm pretty sure I just killed the pig. She goes, surely not. And then I looked outside and we had ducks at the time. And there was this Pekin duck down by the greenhouse just up from the pig lot. And it was raining outside. And this duck was upside down on its back, kicking its legs. Looked like it was swimming upside down. Yeah, the duck had got into the mash. So now I'm really freaking out. I'm like, oh God, I've killed the ducks. I've killed the pig. That pigs get hangovers. And that pig had a good 3-day hangover. He was not right for 2 or 3 days.
That's funny as hell.
And just in a bad mood. You couldn't go in there. He normally wouldn't mess with you. Come over, let you pet him or whatever. But I tried to get in there for a couple days and he'd come over and try to bite the shit out of me and everything else.
God damn. Oh my God. Well, I sent Alfredo a link and he sent me a comment on the phone saying, send me a link. I told him I did. I sent you a link. He wanted to talk to you. So I don't know. Maybe I should turn my phone off and call his ass and tell him, check your phone for the link.
Right.
Hillbilly Glass Barrel says the original liquor chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I have a similar story. I was out here in the shine shed, ran a batch. It got late. I made a mess with some of the heads, and I cleaned it up with a paper towel, and I threw it in the trash can out here, right? I didn't think anything of it. And I go to bed that night. I get up the next morning, come out here, and this rat got into that trash, and he was staggering, trying to get away.
Oh man, you guys, do you have and I don't know where you're located at, but you guys probably have my bet. I didn't know this was a thing until a couple years ago. You guys have wood rats? You ever seen one of these damn things?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like a Norway rat that takes care of itself. I didn't know that this was a thing until a few years ago. So I'd heard my grandparents talk about them. I live in their old house, and so it's got two basements, one on one side, which is it's a cellar basically, concrete floor, and then the other side just dirt floor. And I guess some rats used to get in there or whatever, and I didn't think anything of it. And so they abandoned the railroad out here several years ago and left all these cross ties. And I guess these wood rats get in there and they breed in them. Well, they were getting in the house, and these things are big. They get big, like huge. I went down in the basement one day and I saw that thing. I saw one of them things run across the floor. It was like the size of my forearm. And I was like, nothing. And it's not like we have a dirty house or anything, but
Right,
nothing
right.
will make you feel like a worse human being when you have a child in the house and seeing some kind of giant rodent like that. Like, you're a dirty person then.
Yeah.
But
No,
I
I
was,
get it. I'm not. My wife is the most cleanest person in the world. I swear, that woman constantly clean.
mhm.
And yeah, it has nothing to do with cleanliness. It's just what you have available for them to eat, like grains.
Yep. Well, I started setting rat traps for these things. This is the part that you'll laugh at. So
I got one for you about a rat trap.
I was in the living room and I heard this rat trap go off. So I ran to the basement. I was just, fuck this thing. I'm done with it. It's got to go. Turned out there were about 8 of them running around here by the time I got done. This first one though, well, it was the wintertime. They were trying to get in the house to get warm. And so this first one, the rat trap didn't kill it. I guess it broke its back legs or whatever, but this thing's like dragging the rat trap off. I grabbed a flat scoop shovel and started beating the hell out of this rat. And my wife's upstairs. She goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm killing this fucking rat." I should have kept it though. That thing was massive. I didn't know that those were a thing until I looked it up. I thought it was a Norway rat, but they're woods rats is what they are.
Yeah.
Baking soda and peanut butter mixed into a dough to make a ball.
Mhm.
And you put it down and they'll eat it and they can't burp. It makes them explode.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know.
I tried everything, Lisa, and I really have. I've tried everything. So somebody made a suggestion. Well, why don't you pour some shine in there and get it to try out?
With mice, what we figured out was I'll take a bucket down in the basement and put a little bit of still beer in it, about an inch or so. And then I'll put a block up next to that bucket because then mice will get up there and get in the beer. And then they get in that bucket and they either get drunk and can't get out or they drown and can't get out, whatever. But that usually keeps them under control. And luckily, knock on wood, I ain't had that rat problem for several years now. And I hope I don't ever have that.
Right? Yeah. Once you get rid of them, they're pretty easy to keep getting rid of. But
yeah. Well, they came through and they took these old tracks out too to build a walking trail out of it. So that all those cross ties ain't sitting up there now. And that was a whole thing. Because all I kept thinking about, because my daughter at the time was only like, I guess she was maybe 3 years old. And I kept thinking, man, if one of them things got in her bed,
damn.
like,
Yeah. I'd freak. Yeah, I'd shit myself over something like that.
Yep. And it wasn't anything, like I said, wasn't anything I did. They just came in. So
yeah, they do. Ain't no 2 ways around it. I used to keep a bird feeder out here, and all those droppings go to the ground. Well, not squirrels are rodent, and it wasn't just the squirrels that come around. That's when the rats came around.
Yep.
Guess what? I got rid of that bird feeder.
Yep. I got me a black lab German Shepherd cross. So it's the most hyperactive dog on the face of the planet. And if it moves in that yard and it ain't supposed to be in that yard, it's dead in the yard.
I'm gonna try Alfredo one more time. I don't understand why he's not responding to me.
He's probably gone to bed. Usually 9 o'clock's his.
Let me give him a call real quick.
You've talked him into boredom.
Probably.
We still alive or?
Yeah, we are. We are.
You got a couple people that were drinking Fireball and blackberry. Must be his blackberry brandy that Mark Morgan made.
Oh.
Mike Frayne says Alan Bishop apple brandy.
Yeah. That's Old Clifty that we did at Spirits of French Lick. It's a good one. It's a good one. That earned us earned Spirits of French Lick USA Today Brandy Distillery of the Year a few years ago. So
I'm drinking Grave Robber Unholy Rye Whiskey.
Ooh. Sounds good.
Made right here in New Hampshire.
Nice.
Pretty
Nice.
good. Pretty good.
Yeah, he might have went to bed. He's not answering.
But I
That
figured
man's got a lot going on too.
I would drink rye for that.
Yeah, he's not answering. I'll just leave it at that.
I was drinking over the weekend. You know, I mentioned my buddy Eric Wolf several times, but he had sent me a 106 proof Stolen Wolf rye whiskey. Excellent stuff. Stolen Wolf is one that should be on everybody's radar. And I'll tell you what, Liberty Pole out in Pennsylvania is another one that's man, they make good stuff. Pennsylvania's got some cool stuff going on.
Got a comment that just came up from Jason Acosta. He says, Alan, any tips for a newbie working with high rye?
Yeah. Watch your specific well, I'm going to presume you're talking about an all grain here. Watch your specific gravity. Don't take it real high. And always remember when you're doing a stripping run or even just a one and done, rye likes to foam really, really bad. So put something in there to break up your surface tension, and don't run real hard on your stripping run. I like to keep stuff with high rye or even just rye whiskey. If I'm doing an all grain mash, I don't like to go much higher than, I would say, on a high rye bourbon, I might go a 1065 specific gravity. And on rye whiskey, I rarely ever get over a 1055, which sounds low. It is a little lower ABV. But if you look at historic rye whiskey mash bills, that's about right. And back in the old days of running pot stills where they were running solids and pot stills on rye whiskey and corn whiskey and all that stuff, very rarely did they ever get over a 1040, 1045 specific gravity. So a lot lower yield, but better quality product. And you don't got to worry about scorching or straining nearly as much or foaming or sticking together or any of that nastiness. So
there you go, Jason. There's your answer. So you currently got 2 books. Do you have another one in progress? Yeah, you said that earlier. You do have another one in progress, right?
Here yet.
yeah, I've got the
Yeah.
kind of fiction book coming, and then the new Distiller's Almanac for this year. We're finishing up editing that right now. We got a few pages left. That should be up on thealchemistcabinet.com within the next week or so here. And so the plan for it is we will always do physical copies of everything, but because people won't necessarily get the physical copy in their mailbox by the first of the year, when you order the new almanac, you'll actually get a digital copy as well as the physical copy. That way you have it from day one of the new year. And then the goal next year is to be organized enough to actually have the almanac done by like October, like a normal almanac would be. But we'll see. So
Hey, Lisa Lowry just popped in. How you doing, Lisa?
Lisa?
yeah, hello, Lisa.
I love her gin, and this absence, I like it a lot, but I like her gin better. I'm being totally honest.
Yeah. Well, and definitely too, there's several different flavors of absinthe. So definitely, if you can get a hold of some of those jade things, and they're expensive, but give them a go. And we will have at Old Homestead, there will be 3 different absinthes. There will be a vert absinthe, a green Parisian style, Belle Epoque style. There's the short-term effect, which is the Americanized version, which is the purple absinthe. And then there's a third that's called the Lion, which is heavily marigold influenced and also colored with marigolds.
Interesting. I want to make an absinthe one of these days.
Yeah, man, that's what I call it. That's the distiller's thesis. Whether someone likes absinthe or not, if they can make an absinthe, make a good absinthe, and make it masterfully. And when I say that, and I'm a little bit of a snob about my absinthe, but when I say that, I mean, like, can you do it with the proper amount of botanicals, that full botanical load where it's almost like a tincture going into the still, like I said. And you may have to do some things to modify your still to do it. But if you can, a distiller that can do that can make their base alcohol and then make an absinthe and make it their own, that's where a distiller really, in my opinion, earns their stripes. Like that's where you're at a point where me as a distiller, I then look at that person, I'm like, no, you are a distiller. Right. That's the point where I'm like, yeah, if you can do that, you can do just about anything you set your mind to.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. After having Lisa Lowry's gin, I swore up down I was going to make a gin. I haven't yet.
Well, the old American gin thing from back in the day, and you may already know this, I don't know, but fun little experiment for you. Used to be, especially during the Revolutionary War, we had a hard time getting juniper berries over here because most of them were coming out of England or Europe, and there were blockades. And America really struggled to make good gin for a very long time. But most of the early distilling books, like the Practical Distiller and the Distiller, they will tell you to use Eastern red cedar berries, because Eastern red cedar is actually a juniper, not a cedar. So we've done a little bit of that at home over the years, and they make perfectly acceptable gin. But for example, you just take a colonial style rye whiskey like the George Washington Mash Bill, and then use that base and make a gin out of it using those cedar berries.
Huh. Interesting. I'm learning so much tonight, I don't know where to start.
Yeah, there's a lot on the botanical side that's I hope I can get some classes through at Old Homestead where we can get to the point where we're doing some of those advanced classes, because there's a lot of things that people don't think about in terms of flavor. And like I call it flavor bridging, and I'll give you a really good example. But if you want like cinnamon flavor, like cinnamon red hot flavor, and you want to do it naturally,
Vanilla.
you don't just use cinnamon. It's actually 3 ingredients to get it. It is cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon, and chili pepper. If you don't have those 3 together, you'll never ever get that hot cinnamon flavor.
Yeah.
It's because they all 3 work together.
Cool.
Oats work the same way in distillation. Oats have a lot of long chain fatty acids, and so they hold things together, and they make this interesting flavor bridge where, for example, if you use a little bit of oats in a rye whiskey, you can almost pull almost like a snickerdoodle cookie sort of thing out of it. But there's lots of
oats also help smooth it out too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite a bit. They mostly from adding to the mouthfeel by those long chain fatty acids. They add a lot of creaminess to a spirit.
Cool.
You said you do heirloom seeds. What it was? Heirloom seeds?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I still maintain a lot of seeds, not just heirlooms, but created heirlooms too, where, like, you know, if there wasn't a variety here in the Ohio Valley that fit our needs, we would create one by making either controlled crosses, but more often than not, we would do what we would call a mass cross, which is we would take we'll just use tomatoes as an example because they're an easy one. We would take
don't cross with anything.
yeah, we would take maybe 8 or 9 different different tomatoes that we like the flavor of, but maybe they didn't have the production that we wanted, or maybe they didn't have the crack resistance or whatever. And then we would encourage them to cross back and forth, especially by using borage, which is a garden herb. So we'd plant borage in the middle, and then we'd make a circle of those 8 or 9 varieties of tomatoes we wanted to cross around that borage and let them cross. And then the next year we would take as many of those seeds as we could, plant those out in the field, not fertilize them, not weed them, not do anything to them. And then over the years, start selecting for the ones that had the traits that we wanted, that also could survive in the worst possible circumstances they were put in. And that's how we would develop new varieties.
Nice. I know a little bit about that stuff. I've forgotten half of what I learned, but I went to college for horticulture, so I got a little of that. So
yeah, well, here's a little cheat with tomato breeding too. Since you mentioned it, I'll tell you a little cheat. So the beefsteak tomatoes, your big tomatoes, they'll readily cross because the stamens on the flowers are exposed. But most of your other tomatoes, they won't readily cross because the stamen's not exposed. So if you want traits from those other regular sized tomatoes or from cherry tomatoes, etc., in your beefsteak tomatoes, and you don't want to do controlled pollination, but you want to encourage it naturally, do what I just said with the borage in the middle.
Right.
Because what will happen is the halicid bees, the little corn bees and the sweat bees, they can actually get in there and work those smaller tomato flowers and carry that pollen.
Cool.
But
Oh,
you gotta encourage them to come in.
that's cool. Well, Lisa, I was just getting ready. Lisa Lowry jumped in. She was backstage and she left.
Uh-oh. Sure, heard me talking tomatoes. Nah, I ain't doing
Don't
this.
put tomatoes in my gin. That's funny.
Well, one of the seeds that we got from the National Cathedral.
Uh-huh.
Went out there, and Barrage was one of the ones we brought home.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, I this year my experiment in the garden was sugar cane. So there's a gentleman up in northern Indiana, John Schreck, I believe is his last name. He ran a seed company for a while, and he grows some pretty odd things. But he has had a variety of heirloom sugar cane. We think it's what they call green home, which a lot of people in northern Mexico, southern California grow as their home sugar cane. But he got sent that years ago and has been growing it successfully way up north in the north side of the state, up by Michigan. And so he sent me some of that, and we grew it out this year and actually pressed it for juice, and it did surprisingly well. It doesn't completely mature here, but it matures enough that you're able to actually get a crop off of it. So
Lisa Lowry is in the comments now if you wanna.
I just sent her a text telling her, come back. Um,
So today,
go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry.
I saw Lisa Lowry's episode today. Her and Mike Fannin and Jason Sanders.
Oh yeah, cool.
nice.
She just said she's going to try to come back. She's not sure what happened.
Yeah. I'll have a few more minutes here, and then I'll have to wrap it up and get ready to go to bed so I can
All right.
get up and do it all again in the morning.
I appreciate you coming in, sir. And,
No, I've enjoyed it. It's been a good time.
sharing all your knowledge with us and giving us some information. I know some places I'll be checking out soon.
Yeah. Well, what all, I didn't get a chance to really ask you guys many questions though, but I'm curious. Two things. What do you like? Hey, Lisa.
Hi guys. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say hi.
Yeah.
No,
Hello.
you can stick around, hang out with us. You're cool. You're good. Glad you popped in.
Yeah.
Alfredo was going to, and I don't know what happened to him. I don't know.
Oh, thank you for the invite. Yeah. So
Well, what was your question, Alan?
I was gonna ask you what you like to make, and what you like to drink.
I'm mostly a bourbon whiskey guy for the most part.
Yeah.
But I do make a potato shine. That's my regular shine. I run it off of russet potatoes.
Nice.
And that's my normal run, but I also do like to make a lot of brandies. My blackberry brandy, I love absolutely. I can't get enough blackberry. Lisa Day knows I drink the cheapest blackberry whiskey out there, but it's so delicious to me.
Well, they'll all
Bird Dog,
like it.
Bird
Yeah.
Dog, $16 a bottle.
Yep. Nothing
It
wrong with
So I
that.
love that stuff. And but 2 years ago, I made a mango peach brandy from my neighbor's mango tree. I collected all the mangoes and made it up. It came out really good.
Very cool.
In fact, Alfredo's wife will only drink that moonshine. She won't drink any other moonshine but my mango.
That's
she's a
awesome.
smart lady with good taste.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
I'm
There
just
you
bragging about your gin.
Aw, thank you. Hi, Lisa.
go. Hi, honey.
So you
Thank
got
you.
another question, Alan?
I think I did, but I don't know what happened to it.
All right. little absinthe going on there.
Mm.
Oh,
No, it's today was we had a very talented mixologist come in from here in Indiana, and so I spent the day preparing all of the liqueurs, because we don't have those in production yet, so I had to make bench samples of all those and then do tastings on all those and then go sort of pitch to her. So I got about halfway day drunk and then had to sober up to come home.
We've all been there running a still.
Yeah, right. Yep. But it was a good time, and she'll make excellent drinks out of them. So she runs a company called Make and Muddle for anybody who's looking for cocktail components, and she also does custom cocktails and all that stuff too. Incredibly talented lady for sure.
Nice. What are you working on, Lisa? You working on anything special?
Well, I'm always working on something. So, I know that. I mean, I don't know how much I could say about
Oh well, yeah, I didn't mean to. No, don't.
a couple projects in the works. So I think we'll probably end up talking about it in January
Okay, cool.
when we all meet up. Most definitely, but I know there's always something going on. I always have, and I'm sure all the other distillers out there have the same thing too. But you always have people come to you saying, "Hey, look, let's open a distillery."
Yep.
I'm like, you're so funny. Funny shit right there. Well, I'm just kidding. No, so there's always something in the works, and I suppose the right opportunity when it comes along, it'll fall in my lap. But I'm still with Dunamis down in Florida.
Nice.
They've got, I made them an excessive amount of. Sorry, I'm outside on my front porch, and my dogs are like, shoo. So, good luck. Okay. So they've got a lot of product that they're working through. They're taking on new clients all over the country, which is really cool. So, our products are spreading.
That's awesome.
Super excited. You saw the article that came out of New York, which was really nice. Yeah. So we're picking up a lot of exposure for that. But I mean, really, I would love to just make more and more and more gin and more recipes and help more people do more gin. And I mean, that's really
I'll be calling you.
what I'm looking at now is like, okay, I love it. I know how to make it. I can make all different types and variations. So who else out there needs help? Is there anybody? Maybe it's just in my mind. I don't know, but I would love to go anywhere and make gin. Really, I would love to conquer the UK, but that's back up for gin. So.
Works.
Yeah.
Well, now's a good time to be doing gins and botanical spirits and anything alternative for sure. There's opportunity out there for that, and the good thing now is too, because this bourbon shakeout has just started, and it's not going to end anytime soon, and it's not going to be pleasant for anybody who's involved. But there's still plenty of opportunity for distilleries that are connected to tourist attractions and distilleries that are in urban areas that can provide experiential drinking, and that's what botanical spirits do. So there will be plenty of people out there looking for that stuff, without a doubt.
Yeah. No, that's
One of the comments, and this is for both of you, Lisa and Alan. He says, Lisa, how would a common person get their liquor in the hands of a distillery to run?
well. First of all, you really got to look at the price of what that would actually cost. So it's way more than everybody thinks it is.
Just ask Brian Battle.
Yeah, right. No, you can't just go and say, okay, I'm going to make just a bunch of liquor and it's there's time involved, there's research involved, there's just getting it to market, the time that it takes to work through the bottling and the labeling and then the distributors, and I mean all of that stuff costs money, and it costs the distillery money, so the distillery is going to make sure that you pay it. So if you are ready for that, then you need to come to the table with a check to get started first and foremost. Otherwise it's just not it's not going to be worth it on either side. So that's a
Yes.
that's a big problem. if you want to, a couple, you want 30 cases, okay, whatever. Let's just throw some stuff in there for you. But that's not, it's not going to make you any money. It's not going to get you any notoriety, and it's going to cost the distillery way more.
Right.
So
There's also the things that people don't consider too, not just the money and the time and the effort, the man hours, labor, all that stuff, but there's also, if you're playing around with things on the home level, just because we as home distillers know that you can use something doesn't mean that it's on the FDA generally recognized as safe list, which is a whole nother issue, which will hopefully improve over time. Or it also doesn't mean, you got to figure out where you're going to clear that at. Who's it going to go through? Is it going to go through a distributor, through a tasting room, whatever? And it's a little different in some of the southern markets than it is up my direction or out towards the East Coast or the West Coast. But I can also tell you that depending on what state you're in, one thing I can guarantee you that I have experienced in my life is if you were ever in the moonshine business whatsoever and you were selling liquor illegally, do not count on any of those people to come to your distillery and buy anything from you whatsoever. Even if you make the exact same thing that you made at home, because in their mind, it is not the same thing.
yeah, exactly.
Michael,
That's not saying everybody, like, the Mark Morgans of the world who are loyalists instead of just, admirers out there, liking posts and stuff like that. So, there are those people, but, you're really in the business of selling pallets. Pallets worth. You're not selling one bottle here and there is not going to make you out of your tasting room or anything like that. So you really need to focus on selling pallets.
there's so much involved in that. You have to buy the bottling, the corks, everything about it.
Yeah.
And not to mention, then you have to get a distributor.
Well,
Label
and I'll tell you, distributors are not your friend at all.
No, they're not.
You think they're going to go to work for you? They will not.
They don't.
Unless you have Jack, Jim, or Jose in your name, then maybe. And because they're getting some sort of kickback or whatever they say, they don't get that. But so they don't. So then you're spending all of your time out there selling your product, which is not a bad thing for an owner to do. But you got to identify your market and make sure you're streamlining it enough to move it in the right places. And restaurants won't sell your product. I mean, I'm sorry, sounding like such a Debbie Downer. I'm really sorry.
It's just true.
Sorry.
It's just true.
Trust me. If you
It is the truth.
go to work as a consultant or go to work at a distillery and have a really good time and go home at night and go to bed, and you don't have to worry about it until the next day. That's the best thing ever.
Hey, speaking of which, I saw an ad.
Yeah.
What was it? Day before yesterday, an ad for you guys were wanting to hire for what do they call those? That go to restaurants or not restaurants, but different. Yeah, ambassador. Yes,
Brand ambassadors. Yeah.
I was like, I could probably do that.
I mean, it's that takes a excuse me, that takes a special person too, because you've got to meet all the store managers, got to travel and shows, and it's a lot of windshield time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to anymore. That's why I went to a distillery that's next to a lake.
That's great.
Let them come to me. I'm done with that shit. I'm over it. I've had enough of it.
Michael Hatley also asked, the same guy that asked that question is asking, well, roughly how much?
Well,
I haven't tried it. Go ahead, Alan.
You would. So just as a rough estimate, a rough outline, and this depends on how much you're wanting to make at any one point in time, what size system the distillery has, how it's powered, etc. But just to give you a range, and we're talking bulk product here, so we're talking at least a few hundred gallons at a time. Let's say that if you go with a distillery with a column still and you're buying enough of it, and it's something pretty common like a bourbon mash bill, you might be able to get it made for as cheap as $12 a proof gallon. But more than likely, you're going to want something on a pot still, and it's probably going to cost you anywhere between, on the low end, $18 a proof gallon being 1 gallon at 100 proof, and upwards of, if you're talking rye whiskey or something of that nature, upwards of $42 a proof gallon.
Yeah. Yeah,
little
well,
steep,
right.
little steep for me.
You really got to consider all of, it's a manufacturing
Right.
process.
It's
So
not just it's not just the making it. It's
yeah, you've got to pay. You've got to pay to have somebody develop it. Like I said, you've got to pay it every step of the way, and time is money. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Here's these monsters. See what I'm battling with right now. These two,
they're happy to see you.
they are. I know. We just got home. Get down. Your little Frenchie. Down. Steve, get down.
Yeah, there's so much to the aspects. It's not just making it. There's the bottom. There's the marketing. There's the whole. There's so much involved.
Yeah, there really is, and having to source bottles and having to source, all of those things, the enclosures and the caps and the labels and all of the little tiny details that if you can't buy in bulk, you're going to pay 2, 3, 4 times as much.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll get your shipment, maybe, unless somebody scoops it up from underneath you. So
And also, like Alan pointed out, also having it shipped to you or whatever, yeah, it varies from state to state on the laws from state to state. Like
right.
For me here in Florida, I would have to set up a warehouse to store it in, or pay the distiller to store it for me.
Right, exactly. So there's more more money that you're
Exactly. Yeah.
On the small side of things, this is something I don't see many distillers take advantage of. But one thing that a person can do if they're not of the mindset that they're going to get into the business of doing this, one of the things that you could potentially do is maybe you go in with a group of other people that are interested that would help you fund doing, a barrel or X amount of gallons of something or whatever. Yeah. And then that, you just end up buying that at a wholesale price through the tasting room, just like a single barrel group would or whatever. And in that way, you and your buddies have bottles and, you just have the expense of that little run in it. But otherwise, it gets expensive real quick.
For me personally, looking at it that way, Alan, you're better off to do a run and fill a 15-gallon barrel yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I'm 1,000,000% all about that for sure. I don't see any wrong with that.
Yeah.
I will always support just have at the home distilling all you want, because that's how I started, and I just always have to make sure that I'm not saying that as Alan Bishop from Old Homestead. I'm saying that as Alan Bishop from the Alchemist Cabinet. So
cool. Hey man, hell yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Michael Hatley said he appreciates you guys' answering his questions. This is in my future and trying to unstick my wheels. So he's trying to make a future out of moonshine.
Nice.
Well, and find you a distillery somewhere and get on their staff and work your way into it. It took me 11 years to actually have ownership in something, but it's a long journey, but you can find people. You can find people.
That's how I started. Actually, I went to I quit my corporate job, really fat paying corporate job, which was probably hindsight, maybe not, but because I love what I do. But I just went to I made a list of all the distilleries in my state in North Carolina, and I started at the top, and the second one down said, "Yeah, come on." And I said, "I just want to apprentice. Can I just come up and hang out with you guys?" Mm-hmm. And can I learn? I really want to learn. And then they realized how serious I was, and then they brought me on, like college level pay, but it was well worth it. I was sleeping on a cot in the distillery. I'd go up there for the week and hang out, and just total immersion into that. And I learned as much as I could that way. So I always, this being some people go to school for it. Some people, take on chemical engineering degrees. They go into whatever, brewing, distilling. Right. I had a sales and marketing background, so I said, this is how my father started, was working in GM and apprenticing as an electrician, and he worked his way up. So I kind of took the same route, and here I am.
Yep. What you meant to say was you took a quarter of the pay for a janitorial job.
It's all cooking and cleaning, so some kitchen work too. So.
Yes. Yep.
day. It was just, yeah, it was down to nothing. And I don't, you know, it was an old IKEA futon that I slept on. Not care. I wanted to learn.
Hey, IKEA's not bad. Come on.
Well, this one, it was like, you know, your first college or basement futon that, you know, it comes on in a box and just has zero cushioning to it.
Yeah, I got it.
But
Jason Acosta asked a question. He says, any updates on the Texas case regarding home distilling? I haven't heard anything.
Not as of yet, but the cool thing about that is that much like marijuana legalization, the cat's out of the bag.
That's
The other-
all day.
The other thing that I will say about that is, and never to encourage anyone to break the law. I'm not encouraging anyone to ever sell anything, but you know, there's last check that we know of in the United States, there were about 250,000 home distillers. You're at a point where Walmart.com is selling distilling apparatus. As long as Buffalo Trace keeps paying their bills, there's bigger fish to fry right now. So TTB is still not overly well funded. I don't think that most of them, with the exception of a few true believers and just hardcore authoritarian governments, are all that concerned about it unless you're out there doing stupid things, is what I would say. So you got to be really doing something stupid to be getting their attention at this point in time.
Yeah. Don't go on TV and actually make your moonshine.
Right.
For the public. Don't do that.
I'm distilling water. Come on.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Where most people, and every state's different, you know, control states are a little tighter, obviously, but most states where people really get in trouble are, it's not even people being stupid with alcohol. It's usually like here in Indiana for a while, up in northern Indiana, there was a rash of people getting busted. And what it was one of two things were happening. Either you had one state cop who trying to prove himself, young, and busting whoever he could for whatever he could. The other side of it was you would have, you know, you'd see some old couple, you know, in their 70s, 80s, upwards of there, get busted with a 10-gallon still, but almost always it was something like, well, the grandson was living with him and he was dealing meth or fentanyl or something of that nature. And that's where you'd really see a lot of that stuff at. And that's not to say that people don't get busted for moonshining, because they do, but usually it's the other shit that they're doing alongside it that gets them in trouble.
Or their
It
garage.
also comes with association too.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, hold on a second.
There is a lot of that, but I will also tell you this: one of the reasons that I will never speak ill of home distilling, other than that being my background. And also because honestly, the best distillers that I've seen are not trained distillers. They are distillers who have taught themselves, and they're at least open to ideas, and they're not stuck on the dogma of Sazerac and Seagrams from back in the 20s. You know,
Wayne chimed in and commented, he's heathens.
Heathens. That's right. Fucking heathens. The other side of it too is, and you know, Lisa's experience may be a little bit different, but I can definitely say, being centered near Louisville, Kentucky, and having spent more than my fair share of time around Lexington, Louisville, etc. And this happened when I first started at Copper and Kings. It didn't take me 3 months to go through culture shock at Copper and Kings, especially in the Kentucky area, of seeing just how crooked the legal industry actually is in that region. Far more so than what you would think, and far more so than anything I ever saw on the moonshining side of things or the home distilling side of things. I will, I'll give this warning out to anybody who wants to get into the industry, and there are people that haven't seen it and won't see it because they're not looking in the right places. But I will tell you this: those crime families and crime syndicates that were involved in the big distilleries back during Prohibition did not go away. There's still a lot of that out there. There's a lot of people involved around, let's say, the Lexington, Kentucky area that people probably shouldn't be involved with, that they get involved with. And it also is now happening with Oaxaca. A lot of the drug cartels are getting involved in moving agave spirits over the border as well. You know, they're tying up their money legally with the government. So
Yeah,
Well, Dave Brennan just joined us. Hey, Jay.
you hear about those shipments all the time, stolen from Mexico or coming out of there, or Texas or whatever, you know, that are in the news, and it's a reality. It's scary down there.
Well, let me tell you a crazy Louisville, Kentucky one real quick that I don't know. I'm sure I've told this on Distillers Talk before, but I'll tell it here before I have to get ready to wrap up and head to bed. But this never made the news that I know of. I never saw it and never heard anything else about it. But when we got Copper and Kings up and running, we were told by multiple sources in the industry, and sources that certainly would have known, that there was a Russian group running around. They had semi-operators, they had copied IDs, etc., and they had stolen multiple shipments from multiple big distilleries. And what they were doing is they would pull up, show their ID, show forged paperwork, pick up a shipment. They'd go a couple miles down the road, drop a trailer, switch out a trailer and a tractor and a license plate, and take off. And so I didn't think anything of much of it at first, but we had them try to pull that on us at Copper and Kings with a semi-trailer load.
Wow.
And we caught them in the act. And when I called the guy on his ID, he literally took off running and left the semi sitting in the parking lot.
Oh my God.
So now how much of that stuff is going on, right? And somebody's in the know on that. So
Yeah, and how much doesn't get reported. So Alan, is that where you're at right now? Is Copper and Kings? Or
no, I'm at a Old Homestead Distillery, a new distillery we just started here in southern Indiana.
Oh, okay. I've been to Copper and Kings, and it was phenomenal. So such a great place. Good tour.
It is a cool place. It is
Yeah.
a cool place.
It's cool. I mean, you know, some previous employer, I'm sure, but aside, but
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
the people that I worked for are no longer there. So, but it's a cool aesthetic, and it's great branding. And it was a good foot in the door for sure.
Yes, definitely. I'm sure it taught you a lot. What
Mhm.
or not?
Right. But it may have been actually the opposite, because when I got hired, I was the only person that had any distilling experience. Nobody else did. Which is funny, because the biggest thing up to that point that I'd ever run was 150 gallon. And literally myself and Brandon O'Daniel, who is the head distiller there, he'd been a winemaker prior to that, but it was literally day one, like, have fun, go figure out how to make this thing work. So no boiler training, no nothing, just enjoy.
Well, sometimes that's how we learn the best and quickest, you know.
Yep.
We had mentioned that earlier. That sometimes
Yeah.
learning it on your own is the best way to learn it. So,
Yeah, on the job right there. I love it.
Definitely trial by fire. That's for sure.
I can't wait.
And I don't know if any of you have ever worked for an expatriate South African, but I highly recommend, if you need character building lessons, that you go do that, because you have never lived life until you've had an angry South African with a slight Dutch accent yell at you.
My goodness.
And not even be sure why he's yelling at you, but just, you know.
I may have had a super high Scotchman yell at me once. So like, you're really high and you're yelling at me in your native language, and I don't get it. So sorry, I'm just gonna go away.
Right.
that's too funny.
Yeah, I think there's something about us as Americans, where even if you're an immigrant to America, like, where when someone yells at you in a especially a white South African. Like,
Yeah.
no, I don't think today I'm gonna put up with that shit. I don't.
No one should talk to you like they own you. So
No,
Yeah.
no.
Ever.
You know, he did, and in his defense, I doubt he was aware that in my brain I immediately went to the villain from Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah.
That's so great.
You're not going to owe me. You're right about that. Don't
Yeah.
talk to me like that.
Yep. But no, it was. I will say this: I learned a lot about the sales and marketing part of it at Copper and Kings. That was their forte. They were really, really good at that. They were fantastic at it. So,
Cool.
yeah, a lot of good things I pulled out of that, and then a lot of I don't know what you even call them, euphemisms or whatever, but like we called them Joeisms because Joe Heron would say this shit, and like a few of them that stick out, like let me think of one. So here's a good one. So and you got to imagine it with a South African accent because I'm not going to do it, but
Damn it.
procrastination is like masturbation. They both feel good at the time, but you're really just fucking yourself.
Oh my God. That's
Right. Treading water is the same as drowning. You're just doing it fucking slower.
great.
Along the inevitable.
Yeah, I had a boss once tell me that, the other coworkers were about as useless as tits on a boar. Like, what does that even mean? What does that mean? Get it? Do they not?
Oh, Lisa, you crack me up, girl.
They're like, I don't get it. This little
I've
kid.
heard that since I was wee high.
I'm like, we have boar hogs in Michigan. What does that mean?
He made, and not to go political, but this is a funny when you bear in mind that this was in Louisville, Kentucky. He was it was election time, and he said, how was it? He said me and my wife Leslie are probably the only two people on the face of the planet who have voted for both Nelson Mandela and Barack Obama. And I'm like, I probably wouldn't go like tell your buddies at the Kentucky Distillers Association that. I'm not.
No. Keep that to yourself.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. We don't talk. I don't talk politics at work. No,
Right.
not doing it.
I don't talk politics at all. So too many heated battles and stuff. I said that's.
Yep.
But everybody's doing well, so it's nice to see. Alan, you're not, you're not anywhere to be found.
Yeah, my camera froze up. My internet is trash.
At least he's smiling, I mean,
Right, either that or I got smoke in my eye. One of the two. I don't know what's going on there. That's a possibility as well. So
Is everybody Alfredo? I'm sorry.
At least he didn't freeze up like this, I'll sort it out.
Everybody going to see Alfredo
what was
Jenny, and Doug at Gatlinburg, Sugarlands?
no, I can't. There are a lot of people that aren't going though.
Okay.
I know a lot of people in militia group are going. There's going to be a lot of people.
All right. Well, you guys will be missed. That's for sure. We'll have to go live, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be cool. In fact, while you're here, Lisa Day and I reached out to you last week. I want to do a ladies' night thing. I'll probably do it like once a month kind of deal. Try something like that.
That would be fun. You just got to give me a little notice. So
Yeah. I know. I knew I was reaching out on a limb last week.
no, I'm
It's
sorry.
all good.
I really would love to join you.
well, all right, guys. I hate to run, but I need to get off here and get ready for bed, guys.
Alan, thanks for coming in, buddy. I appreciate your stories and all your knowledge. I
Yeah,
definitely
glad to
want
do
to
it.
hook up with you in the near future, and we'll do some things together. I'm definitely gonna start watching all your podcasts.
Oh, all right, man. Yeah, I appreciate it greatly, and thanks for having me on. And yeah, you ever make it to Southern Indiana, come on by. I'd be glad to show you around.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I'm a good old Missouri boy, so I might head up that way.
Yeah, it's not too far away. And I'm actually over that way every great once in a while. So
Cool.
Thanks for letting me crash. So crash it.
yeah, Bother me none.
Good.
All right, guys. You have a good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night, Alan. Thanks for coming in, buddy.
Yep. Later.
Good night.
Great guy, full of so much knowledge. It's unbelievable.
I know. It's like we rarely
If I
get
could remember a quarter of the shit that he remembers, that'd be awesome.
Sorry, I missed it. I'm sure I would have learned a lot from him. I'm
Oh
sorry.
my God. That man is so knowledgeable. Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's diverse, you know. He knows a lot of things about different things. He doesn't
So
just.
what was one thing that you guys learned that was something new? One little tidbit that you can recap, maybe, or not?
Good question.
You're like, ooh, pressure's on.
Yeah, pressure's on. Wait, you asked me that after a poor absence in? Thank you.
I should know better that by
I
10.
like this stuff.
Tomatoes breed with borage in the middle.
No, there was a lot of history about Indiana and all the stuff that came up, how most of them in his area were moonshiners. They all lived off moonshine, you know. You couldn't go to a farmer's market because everybody went to the farmer's market. What are you going to sell your product for? You know, I got the same shit you do.
That's
You know, and that was interesting to hear that story. He's got a lot of good stories. He's got a lot of good jokes.
I bet it does. You know, after 11 years in the distilling industry, and 11 years is like, you know, like 50. You know, there's just so much that happens and so much that goes on, so much crazy stuff. So,
And here lately, it's really been booming. I mean, it's exploded.
mhm.
Just like Alan pointed out earlier, they figured out there's over 250,000 people that distill.
That's crazy.
Home distilling.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. You know, it's just, I mean, why not make it at home? You know,
Yeah.
You know, cost effective. You know,
But
it's
that was my number one argument with my wife when I went to buy the still. She's like, "What are you going to do with the still?" I said, "We'll make whiskey. Do you see how much that costs? Do you know how much I drink whiskey?" I mean, you know,
yeah.
it'll pay for itself in time.
And sounds like you won. So
Yeah, it's right here.
very nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I sure do miss y'all.
Miss you as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
When are you coming back down to Florida?
What's that? Hi, I'm sorry. What'd you say?
When are you coming back down to Florida?
Probably not until February, maybe
Okay.
February time frame. So they've got you know, a ton of vodka and gin and bourbon to work through that I've made. Rum as well, for that matter.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get into some new projects next year. I'm really looking forward to like doing like a really high-end gin for him, so he can,
Nice.
because he's starting to, you know, he's really gaining traction throughout.
Yeah,
Like,
you said he's going nationwide now, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, you can buy it online. I'm not exactly sure who it is, but he's also working with you know, to get into North Carolina, California, you know, all of those swing smile states. I don't know, from between here and there. I don't know what all they're doing. I just like to make it. I'm like, care about
I'm with you. I'm with you. I just want to make it.
yeah, I want the awards and I want to make it. So it's all good.
It's awesome. Yeah, you got 3 awards on the vodka, right?
I'm not sure.
I think it was 3 golds.
Yeah, and then the gin, yeah, starting to pick up, you know, some traction. And some people are starting to notice it too. So, you know, it's really cool. You'll see it. You know, the whole premise behind it is, you know, to support the mission and to support the people that fly the missions and that are, you know, are in the military, the police, or whatever. And when they have their downtime, you know, what are they going to drink? And you know, are they going to have some cocktails? But let's really wrap a mission or a cause, you know, around all of the products that are being offered. And I think that's a really great thing. That's another thing too. There's really to gain traction too, creating a movement out there, you know, in the community and in the world. So, and what does that look like? I can't answer that, but you know, you really create a movement these days because people, you know, it's all about social media too.
Yeah, social media has gone nuts. It's just crazy. I mean, look at it. Everybody does it, and now with all AI, you know.
No, I know it's insane. I just want AI to just like I just want to think it, and then AI will do it. Can we get? Because I
Wait a
don't
minute,
want to.
whoa. That
Do
might be too scary for me.
Well, my husband's a software. Rob, he's a software engineer, and he uses AI a lot. So he's actually training, you know, to do coding and all kinds of stuff. So I said, you know, honey, you're creating. One of these days you're going to create a monster, and it's going to just flip on us and take over. I said, well, maybe it'll run my finances and take care of all my stuff at that point. But until then, you know, but
That's kind of scary. I'm leery about my finances. I got to be on top of that.
yeah.
The AI take care of my. I'll be constantly checking behind them.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's going to take over someday, and it's the
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, and you know, and what does that look like for our industry? That's, you know, that's something that we're trying to figure out there. But you know, it certainly helps with your operations. You know, most definitely.
Sure.
But there's I don't think there will ever be anything that will replace the hands-on aspect of it, the care and the senses, the smells, the sights. I mean, all of that. You know, I mean, obviously the big guys, you just press a button, you know, but you know,
Yeah, we all tasted their stuff too.
I don't have those names in my Jose. I don't have those in mine, so it's gonna be hands-on for a while.
Good. Well, let me know when you head down this way. We'll hook up. I drive by there from time to time.
Yeah.
I thought about stopping in the last time. I was like, nah, I got to get where I'm going.
Oh, you should. Yeah. Next time I'm down there, sure, I will let you know, and we will.
Cool.
I love that. So
I'm going to go ahead and end this. I'm going to get off here, call it a night. I got some things to do tomorrow. But thanks for coming in, everybody. Lisa, thanks for moderating. Lisa Lowry.
Lisa Day, you're amazing. Yeah.
Mwah.
Really appreciate you a lot. And it was a great podcast. Love having Alan. He's a great guy. Very knowledgeable. Follow Alan Bishop. Look it up on Facebook. Google it, whatever. You'll find all kinds of information about this guy and what he does.
Alan Bishop. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know him and do follow him, but I want to follow him more closely now. So I want to hear those little Alan wisdom, those little nuggets, Alan nuggets.
Alan Nuggets. I like that. All right, y'all. You'll have a good evening, and I'll see you sometime soon.
Good night.
I love you all.
Hi, everybody watching.
Good
Bye.
night.
Night, Lisa. Night, Mark.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night, Joe Ellen.